We have met the enemy, and he is us. Archie Goodwin and Pepe Moreno's lost sci-fi classic. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Comics Rot Your Brain, the show where screenwriters talk about the comic books that we love, mostly from the 80s. My name is Steven Bagatourian, I'm one of your hosts.
And I'm your other host, Chris Derrick.
And Chris, we are talking about a book this week on the show, a comic that is so obscure that I think neither you nor I were even familiar with its existence. And so I have to give a special shout out to my friend Alex for suggesting this title to me. And he's a fan of our show, and he's always texting me his thoughts on every episode. And Alex texted me a particularly evocative image and said, hey, why don't you guys take a look at Generation Zero by Archie Goodwin and Pepe Moreno? And I was like, what? What the fuck is that? And it turns out it is a particularly dope post-apocalyptic story in Marvel Comics' much lamented epic illustrated anthology magazine from the 80s that was Marvel's big fantasy sci-fi, more adult magazine where they published a hell of a lot of compelling material that was non-superhero and off-brand for typical Marvel. And man, Chris, this was a dense, really involved sort of a sci-fi epic, and we had a lot to chew on here. And I think they were drawing inspiration from stuff that really was not that familiar to American comic book fans. And Pepe Moreno himself, he spoke about how the inspiration for Generation Zero was not US comics and was certainly not superheroes. And, this is probably a good moment where I can read a little bit from Pepe Moreno's website, pepemorenostudio.com, for those of you who are curious. He is still alive and he is still out there making artwork. And he's got a little thing he wrote about Generation Zero here where he says, this comic is a classic in its own right, shaped by both time and circumstance. It was originally conceived as a serialized episode for Marvel's Epic magazine, and it was meant to capture the European trends of Métal Hurlant and other famous artists and storytellers from the golden age of comics in the 80s. I came from Europe, bringing with me a European style that was distinct from the American superhero comics. America was my new world, and I wanted to create something that felt like a real-life, movie-like adventure while setting a new aesthetic. I guess that's why I came to America to make movies, but on paper. I was fortunate to enjoy a great relationship with my all-time favorite editor, Archie Goodwin. He was a writer who appreciated the post-apocalyptic story I proposed. So that's interesting. The idea originally came from Pepe, which I named Generation Zero, decades before the concept of Gen Z became mainstream. There was no AI back then, so Archie helped craft the written story and the dialogue, and the rest, as they say, is history. Artistically speaking, this stands as one of my most colorful and vibrant works. The original pieces remain fresh today as the day they were painted. The colors haven't faded a bit since then. While it's not for me to judge, I can say that the original pages are just as bright and exciting as when I first painted them with my bare hands. And yeah, man, this is pretty amazing. Artistically speaking, I have to say that Pepe Moreno's aesthetic, for me, it does conjure up, in terms of the intensity of the color, somebody like Richard Corbin, who is doing a lot of sort of similarly vivid, singular effects with his coloring. But Moreno is combining it with like a drawing style that feels much more European to me, a la Mobius or Enki Bilal, or a little bit of Drouillet. A lot of these kind of Métal Hurlant guys, clearly I think were a huge influence on Pepe. And I think he does them proud on this series. I think it's really legitimately beautiful European looking comic book art and deserves to be mentioned in the same breath as a lot of those other legendary creators. I thought this was a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of comic book art altogether. And for me, the art was probably the most fully successful piece of Generation Zero. I thought it was really breathtaking in a lot of places.
I absolutely agree with the art. There's the two guys that, you reminded me of. You're right. It was Mobius, but it also reminded me to the arts how clean it was. I don't know the artist, but the book called Corto Maltese,
Oh
and
yeah, that's
which is
Hugo Pratt.
yeah, Hugo Pratt. Yeah, so that it's clean like that in terms of his compositions and his line work, but the painting for sure is this own thing. And obviously, people it's very rare to do uh, to paint stuff for comics because of the schedule. I mean, that's a cool thing about Epic Illustrated. When we were going through the issues, there's a lot of stuff that's painted.
Yeah,
That they published in that because
oh,
there's
totally.
maybe only like 6-8 pages and is coming out like bi-monthly. So I think that's a schedule that maybe a painter could perform on. I don't think you could do 22 pages per month painting. I mean, you could if you were like maybe that. We made a book with the Cult. We talked about the Bernie Rice's Batman, the Cult, like that. I think had a painted look to it too, maybe. But the way I kind of remember it, but that Wasabi does a miniseries, so it's probably painted ahead of time, completed, and then the release date was set. Same thing with Hawkworld.
Yeah, and
So
the cult was colored by Bill Ray, but you're right, it had a very painterly, a very unusual coloring style for that time. Certainly for a Batman comic, he was painting over rights and stuff. But I think Bill Ray made that look really just creepy and weird
creepy and amazing.
and amazing, but very painterly for a Batman book. And we keep talking about the cult on the show. We really should look at that one of these days because I remember that book really getting under my skin as a child.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Speaking of the time, let's talk about the time. Before we do, if you are a fan of the show, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to be notified for when the next episode drops. So, as we said, this book came out. It was installments in first installment was in Epic Illustrated 17, which came out in 1983. And what else is coming out in 1983? So for Marvel, that was the year that X-Men 171 came out, which was, I think, it started the culmination of the Dark Phoenix storyline when Madeline Pryor became Dark Phoenix. Spider-Man 238 came out, which marked the first appearance of Hobgoblin. Also in 83 was the first issue of Alpha Flight and the first issue of New Mutants. And then over at DC is when Frank Miller was doing Ronin, and it was the early run for Alan Moore on his Swamp Thing. Well, I mean, it was his early run on Swamp Thing, and then George Perez and Marv Wolfman were setting the pace doing New Teen Titans and Crisis on Infinite Earth. That's a tall order to be doing at that time. And in terms of the movies that year, it's the top 5 movies that year, which kind of spanned. This was number 1 film was Return of the Jedi. Number 2 was Terms of Endearment, which then went on to win a bunch of Oscars, I think 4 or 5 Oscars. Also out that year was Flashdance, which was the big film that set Jerry Bruckheimer on his way to stardom as a movie producer with Don Simpson. Also was Trading Places. That was 4. And number 5 was War Games.
Oh, I remember War Games. I
Yes.
loved that movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. So now just to let listeners know, if you want to hear some more information from us, some more content, please support our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/comics rot your brain. We have already uploaded, as of today, a 2-hour bonus episode. What it's about, you'll have to join to find out.
That is right. And yes, everybody, please check out the Patreon. We would appreciate it a lot. And we have some very, very exciting plans in the near future for a continuing Patreon series that we're going to be doing that is a very ambitious look at the magnum opus of perhaps the greatest comic book creator of all time. And I'm just going to leave it at that for now. But let me just say that none of you are going to want to miss this new continuing sort of mini series that we're going to be doing only for patrons, Patreon exclusive, more info to come, but we're incredibly excited about that. So
Super excited. And so now let's get on to talking about Generation Zero. I would tell you right now, this book was the first. It's interesting. It comes out in 83, so it's the wake of like Road Warrior and the wake of like Escape from New York, and so it was that the like apocalyptic movies were just kind of hitting into stride in terms of pop culture and things like that, I think a lot of it had to do with how much of a war hawk that was just saber rattling like was Ronald Reagan. Because I feel like the late we saw post-apocalyptic stuff in the 70s.
Yes.
And obviously this is the Cold War, but I think it got turned up a notch once Ronald Reagan became the president, and a couple of reasons why was just sort of tied into this book, because in the beginning, they're talking about the history about how the world fell into there was a nuclear holocaust that did happen, and it sort of stemmed out of the Middle East. And although there was some stuff happening in the Middle East in terms of in the 70s, with the late 60s, early 70s, with the Yom Kippur War and the 6-Day War, that didn't really affect the United States. It wasn't until 79 with the Iranian hostage crisis. And then a couple of years later, which I think was around 82 or 83, was when there was that bombing in Beirut, Lebanon, at the Marine barracks. So you see this kind of explosion of tensions in the Middle East, and in the book, there's so much talk about that the search for oil and trying to control power and trying to put forces on the ground was all kind of centered around what was happening in the Middle East. And some of that stuff in Africa too, where the people were being starved and being frozen, which I thought was a very smart way to start this, because it so speaks of the time.
Yes.
This is not what we even think about now. I mean, we're so apathetic to what's going on. I mean, I remember that time. Was that we talked about this yesterday? That there was that one, the X-Men book where they were the hope, the hope thing about the famine.
Oh yeah. Right. That was Heroes for Hope.
Yeah,
was the
Hope.
Marvel Comics benefit book for the Ethiopian crisis that was going on at the time, where just a whole host of comic book luminaries joined in rather, to help with raising money for Ethiopian famine relief. And you had everybody from, so many people, but it was Arthur Adams, Bill Sienkiewicz, Frank Miller. All the big names kind of drawing and writing a page or two of that book. And then DC did their own version. I think Marvel was first. I think Marvel's was Marvel's Heroes for Hope.
Yeah, Heroes for Hope. Yes.
And then DC did their own version of a book very similar, Heroes Against Hunger or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, but it also, there was that song, We Are the World was out. There's all those big stars coming in. There's big rock stars come do that. So it was interesting that's the context of when this book comes out, and it's set a few years. This is the thing that was kind of strange to me in reading it. I didn't quite understand when the nuclear holocaust happened in comparison to when the story was taking place.
A little tough to say for sure. I think it did seem a little vague. And let me just also piggyback on what you were saying too about the context and the time, because I have this interview with Pepe Moreno here where he's speaking directly to the influences he was looking at that time, because he did another post-apocalyptic story immediately after Generation Zero. And I suspect maybe he was germinating thoughts for one while working on the other. His other book was called Rebel. And it was also a very substantial post-apocalyptic graphic novel where he got none other than Larry Hama of G.I. Joe to come and help him out with the script and the writing on Rebel, which looks like another original Pepe idea. So Pepe was very much in this post-apocalyptic space. And so here in this interview, he's talking about Rebel, but I think a lot of this could apply to Generation Zero as well, because they're set in extremely similar milieus. And the interviewer says that Rebel is often compared to the movies Mad Max and Death Race. What do you think of these comparisons? And Pepe says, I was influenced at that time by Mad Max or The Road Warrior and Escape from New York, like you said, Chris. So that comparison is okay by me. Death Race may be the other way around, given the time chronology, but it was a great amusement to me when it did come out. So that's interesting. He's saying his work actually predated Death Race. I would have done a few things differently with the story, but it was the closest thing to what I was doing with Rebel that I had seen. So interesting. And then they ask him, how long did you live in Spain? What was your life like when you were there? And Pepe says, I came here to America literally as soon as I was able to. And right after my compulsory military service in Spain, which is fascinating to hear about given the content, the militaristic content about Generation
Oh, the
Zero.
characters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
characters we're about to discuss, now we can sort of understand a little more kind of the level of granular detail literally in the artwork, where at times he is seemingly drawing like every grain of sand.
Wait. So I'll just interrupt you for a second. See,
Yeah.
so if this is if he so this all this book came out in 81. I mean in 83. He did the art in 81, and if you back up a few more years
Yep.
to when he potentially did his military service, that's when like Spain was still under the dictatorship of like a Franco. So that's
Interesting.
So that could, I think, like could coincide depending on when he came over here. But he grew up under a dictatorship. Is essentially
That
what it
is
is.
so wild. That is crazy. That's a great point, Chris, to consider, because we don't even think about that often because we're so privileged in the US, growing up in the relatively free environments that we live in, again, relatively speaking, but certainly not under the kind of intense dictatorship or just insane regimes that so many people around the world have to suffer under. And to think about an artist coming from one of those regimes, making a story like Generation Zero, it does lend a much higher degree of, verisimilitude and life experience that they can bring to the pages of what they're doing here. And so, I think that's a fascinating point to consider. He goes on to say, I was publishing already in Spain and in Europe. I started doing work very early as an artist, and I even did a story for Metal Hurlant before I left, but I've always wanted to come to America. It felt like my culture already, and like the center of the Roman Empire, so to speak. He says, I'm an American and I love this country with great passion in all the essential ways that matter most. No, I don't have a big American flag behind me. But the gratitude and affection I feel for the idea of what this country is, what it means to me. And so he goes on to talk a little bit about America. And then he says, finally, the interviewer asks him what it was like for him living in New York in 1982 and thereabouts. And I think this is a big part of the inspiration for what he was putting on the page in Generation Zero. He says, New York was so post-apocalyptic back then. It was still the Cold War. The world was different and culture was different. 9/11 changed everything. But even without that, my kids even tell me that the world seemed rawer and more adventurous back then. And I have a feeling they may be right. I lived in a loft in Brooklyn at the time, and the inspiration for my comics was everywhere. In fact, many of the fantasy scenarios were just like that in real life back then. So interesting, as a guy coming as from an outside environment, from another country, from serving in the military, shows up in New York in the early 80s. And to his eyes, the Big Apple looks post-apocalyptic. And here's a guy who's been in war, overseas, doing God knows what, living through God knows what. And he's got these ideas and these images burned into his mind. And all he wants to do is to draw post-apocalyptic stories like Generation Zero and Rebel. And I think it's kind of just compelling and good to be considering the mind state of these artists going into the work they're doing. And then, he teams up with Archie Goodwin, one of the most beloved editors and writers in the history of comics, a guy who is just such a well-remembered figure. You almost can't think of a better liked figure in comic book history than Archie Goodwin. Of course, he famously created and wrote the Manhunter series in Detective Comics with a then sort of young fledgling artist named Walt Simonson. And, Archie Goodwin went on to just become such a staple at Marvel and particularly at Epic, the Epic Comics line, where he was known just as the cute little caricature that you would see on the inside title pages, where he would draw and write his editorials with himself as kind of like a cute little cartoon figure as a character. And he'd always be dressed up in different outfits with his signature kind of mustache and trademark glasses. He always seemed so charming to me and such a human figure in the world of mainstream comics. He made comics feel less corporate, and it's something we talk about all the time on this show, Chris, is how warm and human comics used to feel. And I think Archie Goodwin and personas and characters like him were a big reason the comics felt so human back then. We always talk about Dick Giordano and his editorials in the Meanwhile pages in the DC Comics. Well, Archie Goodwin was kind of like, a similar figure, I'd say, at Marvel, making the whole Epic line feel like it was sort of a one-man passion project, which in a lot of ways it probably was.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Sure. I think he was the glue holding those creators together and protecting those creators, probably from Jim Shooter and from anyone else who might have wanted to meddle with those creations. And that's probably why, part of the reason why everyone loved Archie so much, because Archie loved them and he loved the work, and he was clearly a serious writer himself. And so he understood it, and that's, I think, an amazing testament to Archie Goodwin. And so I think it's really cool we get to shine a light here today on one of his works that he actually wrote, because frankly, people don't talk about Archie Goodwin's writing enough. I mean, people remember him largely as a figure in comics history more, I think, than they do as a writer. And I think that's a shame, because he was obviously a very serious writer as well.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I remember, not the first thing, but what I think of when I think of Archie Goodwin, the writer, is the story, the little backup thing he did in Detective Comics with Walt Simonson's original first work was that thing with Paul Kirk, the Manhunter.
That's Manhunter, right? That's what I mentioned. Yeah.
That was just amazing.
Yeah.
But it's so, it was like, there was I think last month, we're recording this in October of 2024, if anyone hears it later. But last month, I think maybe it's in July, there was a theme on Criterion Channel about New York in the 70s. And it was all these little movies from New York in the 70s, and it showed you what it looked like. No one who, like he says, born post probably 1990 could even conceive of what New York looked like, Manhattan particularly, in the 70s. I mean, there's that really famous thing, where the city went bankrupt and Mayor Koch said to Joe Ford, he's like, we need some money, and he said, drop dead, and he basically let Joe Ford said to the New York, I think the city went bankrupt. But if you look at it, there was a show called The Get Down that was on Netflix around maybe.
I remember that. I watched the pilot of that. Yeah.
If you see that, sometimes they're out running in the streets. And there's because sometimes but I don't know how this happened, but you look at old photographs just like this. Sometimes there'd be buildings that would get demolished. They would do the demo and they would just leave it. Like they would clear away all the rubble and shit. And you just be like, here's a full lot where there used to be an apartment building or whatever it is. It's just rubble. And so people would go play and hang out. And that's why it had that apocalyptic feel. And I think that Pepe coming from Europe, they don't have that look in Europe.
Right.
I mean, it's different if you were living in Germany, because it all got bombed out. But every place else didn't really suffer that. And it's why those you go there and there's buildings that are 4, 5, 6, 700 years old, because they were that stuff is just there and it stays there and it gives you the flavor of the thing. And I think he's imagining in his mind what's post-apocalyptic is. If Madrid or if Paris got blown up, what would it look like? And I think that's what he kind of was what he was able to capsulate in this book. I mean, because it's cool how so the book is about this guy named Juan Falcone, and it's him and his friend named Dancer, who's a black guy with a cybernetic arm, and his friend named Cube, or just it's like Kubinsky, and they're basically three guys, probably in their what you think they're late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
And they had been part of the post nuclear explosion wars, but they've been deserters. And now they're living in Iceland in this underground silo, much like that show that's on Apple now called Silo. Is this place it's called the Northhold, and they're living underground to avoid all the nuclear rain and fallout and everything like that. And
we should say we pick up that first chapter before they introduce the Northhold and kind of take us into Iceland. It starts off with maybe 8 pages of highly kind of expository description of the great wars that destroyed and decimated like 90% of the world, basically, right?
Yeah, it's description. It's like it's 8 pages, and it's almost like a 9-panel grid.
Yep.
Like is on every page, and you kind of just see like these kind of photographs that have been treated in a way like it's photographs of the time, like of like these starving kids in Africa, or like some riot gear, or like some jet planes going, and these sort of all painted over. So this is kind of like interesting, kind of like this posterization type of like artwork that he's done that looks really fucking super cool. Because it kind of grounds. It feels when you're reading it like it's old footage of like the newsreel or something like that. You're right. So it kind of sets up the stage very, very quickly to bring you in, to kind of set the politics, to kind of set what they're escaping from, and to talk about the old generation that then destroyed the earth.
Yeah, and destroyed the natural resources of the earth. And, some of it's a lot of fairly well-worn sci-fi tropes of like, people being blind to the environmental catastrophes that they were causing, et cetera, et cetera. But here, I'll just read a couple lines so people get the flavor of it here. At the opening, we're looking at pictures of giant oil tankers and tanks and fighters and fighter jets and, soldiers. And they're very kind of pop art, almost like Andy Warhol meets like Richard Corbin, sort of like these images that look like they're photographs or like Xeroxes of photographs that are then scribbled over and then colored with these very pop art. Andy Warhol meets vivid Richard Corbin colors. That's the best I can do to describe it. But the verbiage is kind of like this. It starts off saying, "The story is, of course, only too tragically familiar to us all, yet it must never be forgotten. And what better time to recall the terrible chain of events than the occasion now before us? Remember the blindness to the exploitation and waste of our natural resources, the painful awakening that all those things, such as the world's oil reserves, which once seemed an endless bounty, were now desperately dwindling, and every nation struggled to control a share of that which remained." And then it goes on and it goes on. And so you can see it's not exactly the most artistic or artful cataloging of the events. It's fairly kind of bare bones or like straight writing. It's not like your Alan Moore or even like your Pete Milligan. It's not like this very flowery writing style. And at times I think it kind of borders into a little overly utilitarian for my taste, but you know what I mean? Because it doesn't quite have like the flourish or the attitude at times that could make the writing a little more engaging. But on the other side, it's not overly showy. It's not given to excess. It doesn't feel like the writer is so in love with his own voice. Like Archie Goodwin is telling a story, and it's certainly getting the job done. And in a way, the writing being a bit more utilitarian or just kind of dry, it does sort of juxtapose interestingly with the artwork. And the artwork is, as you said, Chris, it's very striking and it's a lot more adventurous. And so in a way, the prose kind of gets out of the way and sort of tells you what's happening in a very clear way that's not confusing. But the art is really jaw-dropping, and it's a really kind of fascinating juxtaposition between this fairly dry writing and this extremely explosive artwork.
Well, here's something I want to say about the artwork, which I think which a lot of people might not. So this is before the rise of Todd McFarlane and the Image people, but also it's before that manga had or whatever, or manga had the influence on American comic art.
Yes.
And obviously this guy's coming from Europe, so like we said, it's like Mobius or like Hugo Pratt, but it's a style of inking, of composition, of page design, of character design that is sort of, for lack of a better term, it's very foreign to what American comics were doing. And the thing is, it's even more foreign now, than probably what it was then. Because I think there's been such a lean toward that style that's like the McFarlane ripoff, the Jim Lee, the Rob Liefeld, whatever it is, which became like too much of an influence in my opinion, because now you don't get art like this in comics anymore, and it's like it's sort of sad that you don't, because it's like, oh, there's a nuance to this, which is kind of interesting. Like the characters all look, like they're not exaggerated. They do look like people in a way that, it's almost more like illustration
Yes.
than,
Yeah.
the actual like
You're right.
comic book art. And that's, I think, and then the way he paints it, it's so like arresting. It's pretty awesome.
It really is, and I think the painted vibe you're saying, it does speak to how much this looks like a European graphic album and kind of the more illustrative quality. Like this just does not look like something that could be produced quite obviously on a monthly schedule for a Marvel or DC book. Like this kind of work looks far more labor intensive, and it looks like the kind of thing that would come out, like a Mobius or a Bilal graphic album that you would see on an annual basis in Europe. But this does not look like something that could meet the average monthly American production schedule. But it's all the more stunning because of it, because some of these pages and some of these, larger panels of them in the spaceship, or just the shots of these like decimated bits of New York and other places, they're incredibly detailed, and
it's so rich with the detail. That's the
very
thing
much.
too. It's the thing where, like, not to denigrate American comic artists, but a lot of times they, like, I think on purpose they don't detail out the backgrounds that much, because they want to focus on the activity that's happening, like what's like, what's the pose Captain America's in, or things like that. And but that stuff in New York, like, the part when they're going down into the subway and they're in that building and they're stuck, and it's like it feels like an old photograph. There's so much kind of like detail and like grit and grime, and he didn't make it clean either, because a lot of times people, when they're drawing stuff, they make it look very clean, and that's what I thought was like it felt very tactile, like all of it.
Yes.
And that's what I sort of loved about like reading it. I was like, ooh, what's like where's he gonna take us next? And I was a little disappointed in the reading of all this that they only went to one like old fallen city. They just went to New York. The rest of it, like there's some of it's in North Africa in the desert, and there's the island and everything like that. But there wasn't another like there's no attempt to go to London, or no attempt to go to DC or something like that, which I thought could have been interesting, or even like Rome, or it's just I don't know.
Well, who agreed with you, Chris, was Pepe Moreno, because I think that could be part of why his next graphic novel, Rebel, was set entirely in post-apocalyptic New York, because I think he wasn't done drawing that dirty future for the city. And I think you're right. It looks like he had a blast doing it, and he wanted to do more of it. So I think you and Pepe are on the same page here, because he really does kill that sequence. As much as the rest of the book looks gorgeous too, but he does seem to have a particular passion for drawing the ruins of New York. And oh my God, I just noticed that the Statue of Liberty has the broken, crumbled Statue of Liberty that they float by in the spaceship has a swastika.
It says fuck on it.
It says fuck. Okay. Oh, it actually says fuck above the swastika. Okay. All right.
It's got two K's in it. It's FUKK.
That's crazy.
But which to me means that there could be three K's there. So it's because if it's a swastika, it very much could be FUKKK. But but we don't quite see around the arm like that. So, but
hard to know what's going on there.
Yeah, but I do think that there's a lot to it that these guys were doing. But real quick to listeners, back to the story. So this guy named Juan Falcone and him and his partner Dancer and Cube, they're sort of like, and they're in that silo in Iceland, and they are they're sort of like, they're fuck ups in that little society. They don't really fit in. They're more like, they're just restless souls. And what happens is they get hired by Juan's or Johnny's uncle. And they say, we want you to go out. It's time to go look at the rest of the world to see who else has survived. We do have a satellite link up, but we keep it off so no one really knows where we are. But I need you to go out and look and see what's going on in the world. And the main thing is because the uncle and his brother, which is Juan's father, like he left this is like the time. I don't understand that, but he disappeared, and there's rumors that he's turned mad and has become this mercenary killer and all this kind of like craziness. And so
Yeah. Here's just to speak to that, Chris. Here, I'll just quote from the council meeting in the first chapter here, where Juan's uncle is speaking to the rest of the political council members and talking about what they have to do to reestablish some kind of connection or send out an exploration team. And one of the people here says, as we were unable to do when your brother went out, Mr. President, he was a major force in our success here, but the world beyond has corrupted him. It's made him turn barbarian and renegade. And then the president goes on to say, my brother's fate is rumor, but if he has gone bad, it's one more danger we can't ignore. So, the brother looms large over the entire story. The brother slash
the father,
the father of Juan, brother of the president, father of Juan, our main character, Juan Falcone. Yeah. So as they're out there exploring the world, Juan is desperately wanting to find his father and also desperately wanting to refute the rumors that his dad has gone bad, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so that's a giant thing that looms over the story, constantly until the culmination of it all, where it comes to a head.
Right. So and so the first place, so they're given this spaceship, not a spaceship, but they're given like it's some sort of like explorer ship. And so they can fly from Iceland to New York, and I mean, so they can cross the Atlantic a few times. Is basically what it is. And in the first chapter, they end up. Is the first chapter, second chapter that they end up in New York?
No, that's the very first chapter still. It's kind of bookended by a title page, though. So like everything that we just talked about is the kind of teaser, to put it in like TV show language. And then we have a beautiful title page illustration. And every chapter has these full page title page illustrations that look almost like they would have been the covers of the floppies if this thing had been released in floppies. And we'll put them in the video for the show. But these title pages are stunning. Like they are just amazingly evocative images for each chapter. Just gorgeous work by Moreno, just killing it, just masterful artwork here. Again, he could stand shoulder to shoulder with all of these legendary European artists. Pepe Moreno really deserves to be spoken about a lot more based on the quality of this work. And that ship, that explorer ship that they're given, is a pretty cool looking kind of, if relatively small sci-fi kind of vehicle. And, it's not quite the Millennium Falcon, but it'll get the job done for these three guys to go exploring out there in the ruins of the world. And that's really what happens in the first chapter. Is they take that cool, clunky little sci-fi ship into New York, and they have a rude awakening awaiting them when they get down on the ground.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. I mean, it's the thing I like about it. Well, I tell you one thing with the ship that I didn't like. Right, there's one thing about the ship I didn't like is that we didn't get enough like time in the ship. Like in this, like all that's when it's flying, you just see from the outside, and it's like the word balloon is like in the sky, and it's like I wish we were in the ship. Like he was like, when you mentioned Millennium Falcon, I was like, I kind of missed seeing what they were doing in the ship. Obviously, there's a few panels, but it's almost maybe something they missed, or maybe they needed it because. It's only these small, like 8 to 12 page installments in Epic Illustrated, but I was sort of missing that in reading it. And
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%, man. I think that's a very fair critique. If I had one major critique of this first chapter, it's just, building on that same point, it does feel a little bit rushed to me, particularly when they get to New York and things start happening very quickly. Like, we could have used a lot more time in the ship. Also, just getting to know these characters a little bit, because really just as a writer kind of reading this, I'm like, okay, well, they're telling us everything about these characters. They're telling us that these guys are fuck ups. They're telling us that these guys are all like, deserters, and that they're like, just fucking around with sex and drugs, and that these guys are the sort of like deadbeats in this society, and that's why we're going to send them out on this suicide mission, because that same recklessness they display in our orderly society actually could help them out in the wider chaotic world out there. So they tell us all this, but it's a lot of telling and not really very much showing. So I do wish we could have spent more time with the characters, just getting to know these guys, if not before the mission, then certainly in the ship, because really we just kind of jump into the plot. And we don't know much about these characters other than what the president very hurriedly tells us about them. So, okay, but whatever. I'm willing to forgive a lot in the story because the art's so fucking gorgeous that I'm just kind of going with it. I'm like, okay, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, the thing that I loved, and I maybe seen this a few times, but I loved it in this is so it hasn't been overdone because it hasn't been a thing in a long time. They're there on the streets of New York and they're getting attacked by the mutants, and there's that acid rain, and the mutants are like, oh my god, we gotta just fuck out of here. I was like, oh yeah, that was the thing too. Acid rain was a big thing in like the early 80s they were talking about because there was too much like the air pollution. They like the cars were when cars like gasoline used to be like leaded gasoline, and there's other shit that would just spew up into the air. And so the clouds were dirty, and so but he takes it to another level because it's like they have to hold up like a metal sheet to protect themselves from the acid rain. I was like, God damn, that's pretty fucking wild. But no, I mean the first chapter, I felt like it was all rushed. It almost feels It almost feels like what he could have done is, he ends the first chapter right when they take off and leave the silo,
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at this first chapter again, man, it's a really just gobsmacking amount of stuff that happens in 7 pages. It's like our guys descend into what seems to be the deserted remains of New York. Although the buildings are largely still there, it seems like the city is a ghost town, but they're suddenly attacked, like you said, by a gang of mutants that are like, deformed by the nuclear annihilation of the city largely. And so these deformed mutants attack them, and they seem to be preaching or like singing from the same kind of post-apocalyptic songbook as they attack them. The mutants are yelling, condemned, unholy, unclean in the eyes of God, condemned by the eyes of God. And then the acid rain comes out of nowhere and pelts them. Our guys escape after Juan is almost killed by the mutants. And then all of a sudden, in like the next 6 pages, it's like they discover that there's some other humans living underground that are not mutants, that kind of give them medical treatment and let them know that the mutants are under the sway of like this crazy televangelist preacher who's like telling them what to do and what to believe in. And so then they somehow very quickly find the televangelist, and our guys go to kill the televangelist. And then they find out he's a robot when they kill him, and they put him out of commission. And they're like, who the fuck set this robot up here in New York to preach to the mutants? And kind of my head was spinning. I was like, what the fuck is going on? What are we doing here? And they were like, okay, time to leave New York. And then they take off. And it's a really beautiful final page where, one of the guys, it's an amazing final page. One of the guys drops a rose down into the city. And I'd like to believe that what looks like the old woman who gets that rose is Juan's mother, maybe, that he was looking for this whole time. That was my kind of assumption.
Yeah, probably so, because he thinks she's dead.
Right.
But the rest of but there's the brother. That's why I'm saying, like, the timeline doesn't, I couldn't figure it out. I mean, I'm assuming it's like the nuclear war happened maybe when Juan was like maybe in his 12 or something like that. And here we are, it's like 20 some years later, because obviously there's still power and like everything isn't totally like, decay and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of decay, but it's just I can't figure that out. But you're right, like so much happens, and you know what? Because in reading this, I read this first one like a while, like almost a week and a half ago. I forgot that priest was a robot.
Yeah,
it's like it's a thing that I thought was gonna come back and have story significance later, and it doesn't.
No, not at all.
Oh, there's a fake human, because there's not. I mean, whatever. It's a robot, but it looks like, but it's masquerading a human to the point that they don't know that it's a robot, and it's like there's no other level of technology like that in the rest of the story. which I think is kind of, which is, but they're just having fun. So I'm
Yeah,
like,
it does. It feels like fun. It feels a little bit wild and woolly. It kind of feels like something that you don't even think is really going to be collected. And maybe these guys never really thought about the fact that this would be collected at that time because so little stuff was. But it feels very much in its kind of anarchic, crazy sci-fi spirit. It's also a little bit reminiscent of 2000 AD and like the UK weekly, legendary sci-fi comics magazine, because it's got that kind of chaotic, wild vibe to it where it just feels like everything's just gone mad and you don't really want to question the logic too much because it might fall apart. But yeah, like these last pages of the first chapter feel like it should have been 20 pages, but it got crammed down into like 6.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's
oh, yeah.
wild because it's like, they escape into the maze after they get away from the mutants, and they meet this like kind of like skinny Ben Franklin looking dude. And next thing you know, he leads them to a library. And then like, I'm just like, wait, where are they? Why are they not surprised that there's all these people down here? What's going on? But yeah, anyways, it all was a whirlwind at the end of the first chapter. But man, I mean, Pepe Moreno's artwork is just so breathtaking throughout that you are willing to go with it. And, to be fair to Archie Goodwin, we don't know the kind of constraints he was working under. Maybe they told him that he was going to have twice as many pages for this first chapter, and then all of a sudden they switched it up at the last minute. Like, we don't know. We don't know what the constraints were, what the backstory is. I don't want to be too critical because I do think Archie Goodwin is a very capable and strong writer, which he exhibits in many other places throughout this. But this first chapter did feel a bit choppy.
Yeah, it totally did. It totally did. I mean, we'd never know because he's good as I hear to talk about it, and there's not much written about this. Not much written that we could find about Generation Zero online, or I mean, there could have been stuff at the time that came out, but hasn't survived it to the digital age for us to look at now. Yeah, but so then our next chapter, just so everyone knows, this, I think it ran 8 installments in
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
it was issue 70 and issue 24. So if you want to get Epic Illustrated, so you can find them at Comic Cons all the time. So,
and you're probably better off tracking down the original Epic Illustrated issues price wise than you are trying to get either of the Generation Zero collections, because I believe it was collected twice. And, in a shocking twist of events, bizarrely enough, the title was collected by DC Comics and put out as a collected edition by DC, even though it was originally published by Marvel and Epic Illustrated. And Chris, you and I were speculating the other day that might have come down to Archie Goodwin calling in a favor, later in his career when he was working at DC or had more contacts over there, and probably just asked somebody like, "Hey, could you collect my old sci-fi thing here?" And and it got done. But that, by the way, now is fetching anywhere from $60 to $100 to $150 on eBay and Amazon. So good luck if you want to get the collection. You're gonna have to shell out a pretty penny for it.
But at the same time, now that you mentioned, I didn't think about this now. But for people who don't know, the artist Pepe Moreno, he did one of the first digital comics ever. He did that Batman book called Digital Justice.
Right.
And if that sold super well, like you said, like it's one of the top selling graphic novels of all time, he probably had the ear of some people at DC.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
Like print something else, but it could have been a combination of him and Archie, because Archie was over at DC, wasn't he, for like the final years or something? I can't remember.
I think he may have been. But if not, then you're right. Pepe Moreno certainly must have been somebody that DC looked at, as a bankable artist, because Batman Digital Justice, was everywhere for a minute, and it was early computer comics art, like one of the very first digital computer illustrated comics, with Pepe Moreno being the driving force behind it. So yeah, it was a really big deal when it was released. So yeah, he sold a lot of comics for DC. So it would make sense that they would collect it for that reason as well. but it's come and gone and been out of print for quite a while. And I would say this is definitely one of the more obscure comics, maybe even the most obscure comic that we've covered on CRYB to this point. Because I don't know
It
how many,
has to be.
you know what I mean? Like, I
mean,
can't imagine any
I
more
mean,
obscure.
it's possible. Brought to light is more obscure, and I'll say that because of this. Because it was just the initial run around the election in '88, and and obviously because Warner Books like bitched out on it. But I think that this is maybe less obscure because it ran over so many issues. Like it was so it's almost coming out for a year,
Right.
so or over a year.
Well, that's fair. I mean, you make a fair point. This came out in multiple issues of Epic Illustrated, as we said, and then it was actually collected, although those collections came and went quickly, but it was collected, I believe, twice in 2 different editions, and Brought to Light, as far as we know, just had that one collection. Brought to Light's one printing, the one printing of that probably was a far higher print run than any of these, collections of Generation Zero. Brought to Light might have had a print run that was 10 times higher because of the names involved. However,
True.
it was only one print run. So, 6 of one, half dozen of another. But, that's what we're here to do, folks. We are here to cover obscure comics from the 80s primarily. And so this very much kind of fits under our mandate here at Comics Rot Your Brain. And again, thanks to my buddy Alex for recommending that we cover this book, because I was fascinated to learn it existed. And yeah, man, there's a lot here that's worth considering. So yeah, we can go ahead and discuss the rest, because we got multiple chapters ahead of us here as our boys leave New York City and they venture out into the rest of the post-apocalyptic world to see if there is any of humanity out there worth connecting with, and they have a lot of craziness ahead of them.
Yeah. So in the second chapter, they arrive at this island that's called Sea Haven, and it's a colony of people, and it's weird because I think it's somewhere in the Atlantic, because they were saying they were flying southeast from New York, which means it's somewhere in the middle Atlantic, somewhere between, I'm gonna say, Africa and maybe South America. Somewhere like that. And it's a colony that's built on an active volcano that they kind of capped, and they're able to use the eruptive force as from the volcano as their power source to power the island. But the island is not it's not an island, it's sort of like a butte in the middle of the ocean. It's crazy because so it's like a mountain with a flat top. And what's crazy is if you look in that first page of second installment, actually, you see on the first page too, on the cover page, but it's like there's a building that looks sort of like the Dakota building in from Rosemary's Baby, right there, like off to the side.
Like built on the side, right?
Yeah. It's like I kept saying it's maybe not Rosemary's Baby, but it feels like some building from New York like that. Like I want to say like Rosemary's Baby or something like that, but it's very strange. But this is interesting. So they get this place called Sea Haven, and they're welcome with open arms, and it's just this place where these people are having a good time because they have all the shit they need. Like the power source they have, they're living out in the middle of nowhere. There's no one to fuck with them, and they're all like got nice food and nice clothes, and
it's beautiful, right? It's like beautiful. It's actually it's utopian instead of dystopian.
Yeah, it's very utopian. And he meets this woman named her name is
her name is Liana.
Yeah, her name is Liana. She's like the minister, or she's part of the not the ruling class, but the people in charge.
She is the chief administrator. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. No. Hasman, the dude, is the chief administrator, and of course, the woman only gets to be his deputy. so right. She is the deputy to the chief administrator of Sea Haven, and she is a beautiful woman with striking red hair. And Sea Haven is notable also on that first page when they're arriving and he meets her. Just looking at that page, Chris, it's notable for the color scheme that Pepe Moreno has gone with on this island, which is all kind of very bright airy colors, like
Yeah.
a little bit of a soft pastel hue to some of them, but it's like very bright, kind of like reds and yellows and blues. Could not look more different
To New
than
York.
the
Oh,
the
completely.
grimy, horrific New York colors that he was using. So just every bit of the palette is so well considered. And again, man, just Pepe Moreno, page after page, just really just proving his mastery as a comic book artist on every level. This guy is the total package, just stunning and stunningly well considered work.
Well, but you know, it's like, it's one of those things where I find, you know how like in Europe and also in Japan, like comics have more of a there's like an adult audience for comics, you know,
Yes.
which not really the case, particularly at this time in America. So the art has like a style that feels more adult, feels more it doesn't feel like superhero stuff on any level. Like, I mean,
Nope. Not at all.
I'm not saying this guy's better than Jack Kirby, but Jack Kirby doesn't draw anything like this. Like, and John Byrne, and even with John Byrne, like those guys, even when they're drawing like stuff that's in civilian stuff, they almost feel like they're trying to get through that fast, you know. And the stories are written fast, so
True.
so maybe it pays that so before they get into the action. But this guy, he really takes his time to draw. I mean, some of the work looks like who's that guy? He's a designer. His name is Sid Mead. You know, it
Oh
feels
yeah,
like
yeah, the Blade Runner dude.
the Blade Runner guy, and he did like some other work on like Tron and stuff like that. But it's like his there's a you can see the influence of that in this guy's work. You
I
know,
think I agree with you. And I think part of what probably makes you say that is I think that Pepe Moreno seems to take a real joy in the costuming of his characters. Like if you look at the welcoming party, welcoming our guys to Sea Haven, they're all clothed and dressed in very unique futuristic clothing. And it's not just like one type of outfit. They all have unique outfits, even like the little child that's there and the woman and multiple different people. They all have different outfits. And I mean, it's just he's clearly putting so much love into every bit of the kind of the illustration, from the clothing to the architecture. And I think you see that kind of like with the world building of someone like Sid Mead, that
yeah,
everything is so intentional and so well considered. This guy loves drawing people in regular clothes too, which is also what distinguishes him from the average superhero artist, where you can tell that they don't practice drawing people in regular clothes enough. Pepe Moreno has no trouble drawing people in regular clothing. He actually excels at it and loves it. He just is doing it in a futuristic sort of a key here. And the other thing I want to say about the island, Sea Haven, being powered by the volcano, as you said, Chris, that was hilarious to me because that's such a cool conceit for this sci-fi utopian island to be powered by a live active volcano. And you know, as a writer or just as an audience member who's conscious reading it, you know, the second someone tells you that our utopian island paradise is powered by a live active volcano, that's like Chekhov's gun.
no, it's
In a story. You're like, this shit's gonna explode. This shit is gonna go. It's gonna explode, and this fucking utopia is gonna come down in smoldering ashes. It's gonna be a fucking ruinous catastrophe.
yeah,
And
you know it. It's like, okay, dude, I get it.
Yep.
I get it. And they also spend the time to say, hey, there's like like the computers control the valve release on it.
Yes.
But there is a manual release valve just in case. And he said it a few times, and I was like, dude, yeah, okay. So you know, I know the ending now. I know the ending now.
Totally. I was thinking the same thing. Archie was telegraphing. He was telegraphing quite a few things in this story. The volcano thing there being one of the biggies, and then also the constant ruminations on the father made it very, very clear. Although there's a little bit of a twist at the end,
There's a
but
great twist. There's a great twist.
Yeah, there is you're right. That is, to be fair to Archie, some of the telegraphing I think was purposeful, because I was thinking we were heading into much more of a Star Wars kind of an ending here at the very end, and ultimately,
no.
Archie does pull the rug out from under us there. So to be fair to Mr. Goodwin, I think some of this telegraphing was quite intentional, and he subverted our expectations in one very big way.
Completely.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. There's that little kid there. His name is like Tall. He's got that.
Oh yeah.
He's got that tattoo on his face. I guess
Mhm.
it's a tattoo. I don't know if it is
Yeah,
or
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It's weird because he feels like he might be like Latin American, right?
Yeah,
It's
he
just
looks
like,
like he could be. Yeah.
but his name is different because like Tal is not like these other kind of European names. But later on, like when they go to Latin America, they don't spend enough time there. So it's
Right.
sort of like I don't know, but it just kind of shows you like the breadth of what he's trying to do in this book. I mean, obviously because because the girl is so pretty, the guy Juan, he just falls for her, and he's like, oh my god, I gotta fuck this girl, and I mean, it's just
That's one way to put it, Chris. Yes. Yes,
well,
I think
no,
that,
but
that
I
is
mean, but
that is what he's thinking, I'm sure. Yes.
well, no, because he even says it. I mean, I'm making it a little more crass
Yeah,
on than
I don't
Chris.
think he said exactly that
But
verbatim.
he says it enough.
Right.
Right here, right here. Right. He said here one of these pages. He's like, I have to find out. Find out what happened to my father. Then but this girl, man, I don't know. I can't get involved and stay in one place. Like no more than my pop could. He's like, I gotta have her, but I can't. And so which is like it's kind of wild. But I
Yeah.
mean, but it's cool because this whole little place, Sea Haven, like they have learned how to coexist with the nature around them, mainly in the sea. Like they get all their food and everything from the sea, and it's so like you said, it's a utopian in a way where they're living in harmony with the environment around them, which is in contrast to the people in New York who couldn't fucking figure it out. And obviously, in the next couple of issues, when they're in Africa, when they can't live at all in harmony with people, or
Right.
with like nature, it's pretty wild. I mean, and then later on, like, like they're there, they communicate with, like, Juan talks to his uncle and tells him about Sea Haven. And he's like, we need to, we got the communication satellite going. We need to get you guys, like he's like, here's the chance. Both of you two kind of like
Right.
segregated societies. If we could find a place for you to live, then there's stuff that you have, Sea Haven, and stuff that you have, like, like in the Northhold that could bring the next generation of humanity. If we could just get you guys together and find some
Right.
place to live,
Right, right. We could connect. We could connect because that is one other thing we should mention here before we leave this chapter is that when Liana, the woman that Juan's having feelings for, when she's giving them a tour of the island, she kind of mentions the one major problem of this utopia is that they don't have room to take in very many more people.
Yeah, like
And this
nobody.
is yeah, so this is the problem with Sea Haven. And she says, we can't really take in people here. And Juan says, well, you took us in. And she says, yeah, as long as people are no threat, we won't refuse anyone who finds their way here. But then someone else says, but how many can Sea Haven support? Now it's a paradise, yet if the population doubles or triples, and then she says, we couldn't handle it, Peter. Instead of being a place that tries to sustain the best of Earth, past and future, Sea Haven would become just one more society that collapsed and failed. And then the next dude, one of Juan's friends, says, "Wow, our lovely guide leaves us with sobering thoughts." And so there you go. That is the conundrum of the utopia of Sea Haven. It is like a hermetically sealed utopia that has very little space to welcome in more people. So yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at there.
Yeah. So I mean, and obviously, like Juan um and the
Uh,
girl and the girl,
Liana.
yeah, Liana, they have sex. They get, like they do all the stuff to add that romance to the story, which
It's
he.
very tastefully done, though. We should say.
Oh yeah. It's
It's implied. It's implied very clearly that it has happened, but it's like we see them kiss, and then we cut to the sun or the moon, and then we cut to the next morning, and they say, "Boy, last night was really something, but we got to go," or some shit like that, basically.
Yeah. It's very much I mean, although it's epic and it could be for mature readers, it's not.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not.
it's not. There's no gratuitous sex scene,
No,
and
no.
that's not really what they're interested in. And that's totally cool. That's not
Yeah, no,
where
it's
they
fine.
wanted.
I'm
They didn't
I'm
want to
not.
go there.
Yeah, I'm not making any like, oh, you could have done, but I'm just, yeah.
Yeah.
So our next issue, um,
Chapter 3.
chapter 3, they fly. It's called Desert Hunt, and they fly to like Saudi Arabia,
Mm.
and they get caught up in this sandstorm, and they crash land because they run out of fuel, and they have to figure out like how to get fuel for. They're hoping there's fuel around, obviously, because they're making the point that the Middle East was like the place where everyone got their fuel. There's got to be some fuel still left. And I think they said they're walking around like in like the Red Sea, the basin. They said, I was like, wait a minute, that means the sea level, the water is like depleted from the Red Sea. But I mean, it's there's some weird stuff in here in terms of like what happened. But ultimately they get to and this. Now, did you notice this page when they find the tanker that's on its side?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
It's a pretty breathtaking page.
yeah, but did you see how it's really like a double page spread?
Oh, yeah. You know what? Now that you're mentioning it, I am noticing that. But the way we were reading this, it was not so apparent because we were reading a digital copy. But
Right,
yeah, oh my
right.
God. Wow. That would have looked fucking
It looked cool as shit.
amazing.
That would look cool as
Yeah,
shit.
dude, that
Yeah.
looks huge. That looks so epic all of a sudden. No pun intended. But yes. Wow, what a double page spread. It's this abandoned tanker on its side in the middle of the desert. Yeah, that's an incredible piece of art right there. Wow.
Yes, yeah, and it basically it's like there's a military base that is built in the shadow of this tanker that's on its side. Obviously,
Mm,
I mean those things hold like 100,000 gallons or maybe even more than that of oil, and it's like, yeah, I mean there's probably still oil in there because it takes a lot. I mean, like, it's a lot of oil that, it could go forever. But those guys, they're like, hey, we're here and we got to get that oil. And they have, they find some little like patrol car. They hijacked a patrol car. They knock these, they steal their uniforms, which was smart, I thought. And they take their access papers, which I thought was also smart. And they go into to this military base and they fill up that tanker so they can get the oil for their own for their spaceship. And it's kind of cool
right.
because there's that moment where they like, there's like slaves here.
Yes.
Like we don't really see them in the book, like they're not really drawn, but the characters remark on them. Like, oh my God, there's slave labor here and there's slave labor here. And there's that one guy, I mean these guys who are in the little tanker, I mean the little tanks, whatever, the patrol craft that has some oil to it, when they get the part when they're left in the desert and then they walk back to the base and and there's a great moment of tension where like our heroes are trying to get out of the
Yes.
base and the people they stole from are just coming in. But there's that
Yes.
moment where the guy in the metal mask comes out and he says to them, "You failed. I guess I guess we'll put you on like slave burial duty, as your punishment." I was like, God damn, like that's pretty brutal. Because
Yeah, well, we should also mention who this guy in the metal mask is. He's the commander of this like militaristic base. Yeah, and he's dressed in kind of like a Nazi sort of like Third Reich inspired, very creepy looking military uniform with like epaulets and various decorations on it, but a really creepy looking skull on his shoulder and this extremely iconic, I would say, metallic helmet that is completely featureless. And it's kind of
yeah,
like a sci-fi looking reflective helmet where there are no features, no eye holes, no nose hole, mouth hole. It's just utterly reflective and it's really disturbing. And you guys will notice it if you're watching this episode on YouTube. It is the image that we chose for our thumbnail because we thought it was so evocative and so haunting. Is the title chapter heading for this chapter, which is this close-up image on this kind of metal reflective mask dude and a couple of his soldiers. That's our thumbnail, and you can get a good look at how creepy he looks there. But yeah, this is a very dark chapter here, and you're right. This guy seems like he is a harsh commander and a super creepy figure, very much in kind of a Darth Vader-esque kind of a role in this world.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, his mask sort of looks like a motorcycle helmet that's all like chrome, like completely chrome. It's really cool. You know, I mean, our heroes, so Juan and Dancer and Cube, they, like they steal this oil. They're getting chased, and it feels like a scene out of Mad Max where they're getting chased by these army guys who have like, these old kind of like personnel carriers, and they just get back to their ship in time, and they like, and they put the fuel in, and they take off and explode. And then these guys have they have planes too. They have like so they chase them on the planes too. They're like, fuck, why we can't get out of here. But Juan has got some good flying skills, and he figured out a way for them to escape by running them into that tanker, and this is all pretty cool little, like it's like a dogfight scene that's sort of out of like Star Wars or something like that, and it's drawn really fucking well, and it's it's again, there's like the action level that he's able to amp up pretty quickly. I think what something we haven't mentioned, but I like about this is I like the way that they do that the lettering of the sound effects are in this.
Oh yeah. It actually looks very European also, because the word balloons are squared off in kind of like the square way that probably a lot of people would be familiar with from Tintin, and looking at the old the Tintin comics by Hergé have the squared off word balloons. So I always associate that more with kind of a European tradition.
Well, that, but also on this page, like where it says chrome, and badoom, and like those big sound effects they feel like not. It feels like something that Mobius was done. That's all it is.
Yeah,
it feels like was that what was his book? Airtight Garage. When I used to read that. So So I mean, it's this. Oh, this is chapter 3, right?
The lettering is great, and you're right, Chris. The sound effects are awesome. They're very striking looking. It's kind of like they remind me a little bit of John Workman's sound effects on Simonson's Thor, although they look a little bit. They're like similarly kind of like explosive and large and key to the design, but they look just a little bit more kind of organic, or a little bit more kind of like just kind of hand drawn in terms of just like uneven and non-symmetrical. I love Workman stuff, but these look like even like a little bit more like homemade sound effects. They look very charming, and they work really well with the artwork.
Yeah, it's great. It's fucking great.
Yeah,
great,
yeah, really, really beautiful stuff. And again, I won't go off on one of my modern day lettering rants, but it really is a huge part of the artwork. And you can imagine this book looking just far less charming, far less, evocative and everything if these were fonts. And if we had font sound effects, I don't think it would work anywhere near as well. It would really suck. It would suck all the humanity out of it, as font lettering always does.
Absolutely. I mean, so the final page of this chapter is the guy in the skull helmet. He's unnamed. There's a great line that says the devastation, because these guys destroy the oil field. It's like the devastation is great, but far from total. And you just see that guy in the mask, the silver mask. He's holding his hand up, and he's like, "I'll get you, bitches."
That's exactly what the word balloon would have said. Yes,
you can tell there's all this. It looks like the fires of Kuwait burning around him.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh no, this is not done yet, people. Like, don't think it is." So that's good.
Yeah. It's a really good chapter. It's a lot happening here, and I also thought it was interesting, just to go back to the very beginning of this chapter briefly, how Archie Goodwin tells us some backstory about these guys at the very beginning of chapter 3 here. And we find out about them, being deserters in the previous armies they had been in. And, just kind of, again, reminding us that these guys have seen war before and they wanted no part of it. And now here
Right.
they are again, back into a very warlike situation. But I thought it was interesting that Goodwin is kind of like doling out a little backstory as we go here in chapter 3, telling us a little more about these guys who are seemingly kind of fuck ups. But he's reminding us like, well, these guys have actually been to war before and they wanted no part of it. And we're kind of reminded of that in the middle of this chapter where they have the opportunity to execute these dudes whose uniforms they steal. And one of the guys almost wants to, but then I think, Juan, Falcone, or whoever our hero is like, no, I know it's tempting, but we can't do that. Then we'd be just as bad as them. And man, this is why we didn't want to fight in a war, because when you're fighting in a war, it's really hard to remember that you're a good guy. And I thought that was a telling piece of political commentary kind of slipped in here by Goodwin in a very savvy way. And he's also just reminding us that these guys are heroes. They're heroes even in this fallen post-apocalyptic world where life has virtually no value. And they know these guys were trying to kill them. They're still doing the heroic thing. Yeah, we're going to steal your outfits and we might leave you out here in the desert, but we're not going to execute you. And so that's a nice, again, no pun intended, but he's drawn a line in the sand here, quite literally, between our heroes and the people and the forces that they're fighting against. So I think it's worth pointing out because a lot of the stuff that Archie Goodwin is doing here is quite subtle. And, he's dealing with some really heavy stuff here. And I think it's fascinating work altogether. There's a lot on his mind, a lot on Pepe Moreno's mind. And even though the storytelling is perhaps not entirely successful and it's a bit clunky in places, and like we've said, the first chapter seemed really rushed, that's no reason to discount the seriousness of this whole story and how much really they're doing very successfully, which is altogether extremely impressive. Although on the clunky side, one other thing I should mention is that there are numerous instances, Chris, and I'm curious if you had this experience also, where I found myself not knowing what panel to read next because Moreno has this rather annoying habit of defying comic book convention, at least, Western comic book convention. And he very frequently leads your eye to the wrong panel. And if you were just like reading the lettering the way that you're supposed to, and in just kind of the natural way that a comic fan in America is trained to read a comic, it leads you to exactly the wrong panel. You read it and you're like, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. And you have to go back and read a panel that's completely not in the right place and then go back the other way to read the story in order. That happened to me probably at least a dozen times throughout the course of this whole storyline. And it's one of those things that, like, I remember from our youth, this used to be more common, where certain cartoonists or artists would include arrows. Do you remember that? Like when they were doing a particularly tricky panel layout, they would have little arrows guiding you to what panel to read next. And I know that technically it was kind of frowned upon as like, oh, you shouldn't need to do that. If you're a proper cartoonist, you shouldn't have to have arrows pointing us from one panel to another. You should just be designing them in a way where it's obvious and the lettering leads us from panel to panel. So here, I thought it was interesting that the art was not doing that over and over again. I would have to double back and be like, wait, what the fuck? Wait, huh? And I thought that was just an odd thing because Archie Goodwin, especially being an editor himself, he had to notice that. It had to be something he thought about, but perhaps it was because of the labor-intensive nature of Moreno's work and the publishing deadlines they had that Goodwin was just like, you know what? Fuck it. We don't have time to ask Pepe to redraw this. We got to get this to press in, 6 days, whatever. People will figure it out. That's all I can assume, because a lot of that to me was kind of malpractice in terms of like Western comic book tradition in terms of where the panels were going.
Look, that happened to me, at least a dozen times. And I feel like it's one of those things where you said where it's like, which I forgot about, but they would do this in the they would do in the 80s. And it says in the 80s, it's like they would use those arrows to guide your eye. And it's that whole thing where it's like you think you're going to read from left to right and then do like a Z, and it's like, but a lot of times it's like he wants you to read like up and down, like sort of the way the Japanese text you read down like in columns. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And
Or like
so,
go to the right, then go back, and then go back to the left. But then like it would be really odd, like, but not in the way you would think of. And like because some panels are vertical and some are horizontal, it would be very confusing. And
yeah,
like you and I are both people who've read literally tens of thousands of comics.
yeah,
So if we're getting confused, I mean, with all due respect to Mr. Moreno, it's not our fault that we're getting confused. There's something wrong with the storytelling, and like again, I was so ecstatic about the artwork that I didn't really care that much, but I thought it was worth noting that this was something that they let go to press this way, even though people had to notice in the Marvel offices that these panels were not properly being directed in the right order on many pages.
yeah. Oh no, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, and I mean, like I couldn't figure that out. I just was like, this guy not is he? I mean, he knows how to design panels. I
Right.
mean, like and pages, but every once in a while, I guess it's because a lot of times he's trying to do those. Like, it would happen when he would do a panel that almost ran the length of the page.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the
True.
vertical length of the page. So it wasn't like he was like he's messing up like all over the place, but it was like, oh, he has some composition in mind, something he wanted to draw. That I feel like if he made it as like a smaller square or rectangle somewhere else on the page, he might not have had as much fun kind of drawing it or trying to tell whatever
Yeah.
story that it was.
No, I think
But
you're right. I think that's certainly part of it. And, he was doing so many really amazing large panel illustrations. And I'm sure it was a push and pull for him to try to tell the story, plus get some of these real incredible shots in there. But I think the lettering could have helped him a lot in a lot of these instances where if the panel placement or the caption placement had just been arranged slightly differently, or you had a longer tail on a certain balloon, or just little things like that could have really like, this is my point is that I think editing and like editing notes and lettering notes could have fixed these things, but for whatever reason it wasn't done. And then I didn't notice a lettering credit on this book. Chris, do you have any idea who lettered this?
I don't,
I mean,
yeah, I mean,
maybe it was him, maybe it was
well, no,
Moreno himself.
but here's the thing, you know, I'm reading this digitally, and like usually the first page of the inside of an Epic Illustrated, because I have I have like some actual hard copies of this. There'll be a table of contents,
Right.
and it will say all the little art credits. It will say written by, drawn by, inks and the lettering and the color. So you kind of see that on that opening page with like the copyright stuff, everything like
Right.
that. And that's not in this version we're reading it. So I
True.
figure that we don't know that. But you're right. I think that's a good point. That again, it's like, obviously in the comic that the comic that I'm working on now, a lot of times I was like thinking about placement of balloons to
Hmm.
kind of help your eye. Okay, so I'm trying to like to move you to this panel, or or there's what, maybe the reaction shot's going to be in another panel.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to use the balloons that way. I feel like that you're right. Whoever was the letterer could have solved a lot of issues with this if they
Yeah.
were doing their job better. So
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the responsibility sort of lies on the shoulders of Moreno as well as the letterer. And oh, okay, hold on. I think I might have possibly found a credit. I'm looking it up here on the Grand Comics database online, and there are some lettering credits for some of these issues of Epic. Oh, but you know what? The lettering credits, oh, okay, this is tricky. They're all run together for the whole issue. And so, for example, for issue 22 of Epic Illustrated here, the credited letterers are Tom Orzechowski, Rick Parker, Joe Rosen, Jim Novak, Janice Chang, Richard Howell, Gaspar Saladino. So it's one of them. That's who did the lettering.
Yeah. So to me, it almost be like we have to get one of the floppies of this and look at it and
Yeah.
see what was in that table of contents.
Yeah. If anyone has a copy of any of these Epic issues, or these Epic Illustrated issues, or if you just happen to know offhand who the letterer was, please do drop that in the comments and let us know. Because as a big time hand lettering geek myself, I'm super curious who did letter this, and I would love to know that. So yeah, let us know, anybody, if you happen to be in possession of that info.
So our next chapter is in Epic Illustrated 20, and this chapter is called The Rat's Nest. And in this issue, they're flying across. I mean, this is weird because I still don't understand the geography in this whole thing at all. But they
Right.
just left. They just left around the Red Sea, and they're flying across like some. I mean, like it says Italy. They're flying. I guess they're flying west from the Red Sea, like across the Mediterranean, and then and here's this one little shot where we're inside the space, not their spaceship, but their little flight planned craft. So there's just two panels. That's all we get. We don't ever get enough.
We're not spending much time on the ship, are we?
No, we're not at all. But so they're flying around, and I think there's like like those guys from the guy with the silver mask, his people are like searching for them. He's got some satellite link up or some stuff like that. Here's this little. Here's the map. So the map is that when they leave from the Red Sea, they don't cross Italy. They cross like Eastern Europe and come down from Paris, and then they go to like Barcelona, and then they cross to Morocco, right? And they stop in like Casablanca, and so and they see a lot of oil fields. I guess in Libya is where they come across maybe, and then they like stop in Casablanca, and then they land to hang out for a minute. And it's kind of cool that Casablanca is like this place where like people from all over the world have kind of come to meet. It's like a mismatch. It's sort of like the Blade Runner city. Like how in Los Angeles and Blade Runner, like it's this mismatch of all these people from all over the world. It's
Yes.
like I kind of feel like that's how they're depicting Casablanca. But at the same time, just like in the movie Casablanca, there's all those people from all over the globe who are showing up there because they were trying to escape the Nazis.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. That's what I thought of. Like, it does seem like a nice tip of the hat to the movie, with Casablanca being this refuge for all these people in wartime when they're coming together here. Yeah, that I thought was a really cool little homage in the midst of all this. And man, these the scenes of the marketplace here drawn by Pepe Moreno, he's really going all out, and like some of these just landscapes and the actual just the people that he's drawing here with great care. He seems like he's just spending a lot of time on the outfits and just sort of the colors as well. Like really more just exquisite work from Pepe Moreno.
Well, I think this was interesting about this, right? I say that all the time, but this is the thing, is that he's Spanish, right? So he's living across the Straits of Gibraltar from this part of North Africa. So it's safe to say that he might have gone to Morocco or Tunisia or Algeria, sometime as a kid or a teenager, and
Sure.
seen this stuff because there's a feeling to this that feels like very much like I have observed this in real life. That's different than when he's in Sea Haven or when he's in like the burned up New York. I think the New York looks good, but this looks like he's really been there.
Yeah, you're right, actually. It's got a lived-in detail to it that does feel almost like observational life drawing.
Yeah.
And, if this is just done from photo reference, then, I mean, it's pretty marvelous. But I tend to agree with you, man, and it does make sense, based on what you're saying, that this does look like the kind of cartooning that one does when one has actually been somewhere and had some really kind of like feet on the ground experience in a place. It's got that degree of verisimilitude, which is really impressive.
Yeah.
And I have to say also, obviously, we're talking about Pepe Moreno a lot here, but after I took great pains to call out Archie Goodwin's utilitarian writing style early on in the story, I have to give Archie some props here, appropriately enough, because he's actually using a little bit more of a poetic flourish as we get into some of these middle chapters, because this whole chapter opens up with, I'd say, some of the most purple prose that we've seen from Goodwin, but in a good way. I kind of enjoyed it. When the guys are in the ship just descending upon Casablanca, the captions say, "Time really flies when you're having fun. For three explorers looking for paradise in a world ripped by nuclear warfare, time limps on diseased legs." Endless months drain all spectacle from the sight of destruction, leaving only waste. But I thought the bit about time limping on diseased legs
It's
was,
kind of cool.
yeah, it's a
That's
really
cool.
nice evocative phrase from Archie Goodwin. So I just wanted to point that out since I think I was kind of hard on his prose earlier.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Here's something interesting, though. I'm going to point this out, but it's kind of funny. The guy dancer, the black guy, who has that cybernetic arm,
Yeah.
his arm jumps from side to side about which side.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't notice that. That's really funny. Wow, that's a really advanced cybernetic arm where it switches from left to right. That's some crazy technology. Wow.
Just noticed it. I just noticed it now. But so when they're here in Casablanca, I think he's jumping. I could be wrong, but I think he's jumping. But so within Casablanca, he meets this old beggar who's like, I guess has no feet, right? Like his feet are missing, and he's just a crippled man who's nearly blind.
Yes.
And but this guy knows. This guy used to run with Juan Falcone's father.
Yes.
And he's like, oh, I knew you'd show up, which I thought was kind of like crazy.
Yeah.
But
It's pretty cool. It's like a pretty cool little twist. And it's in the marketplace that somebody runs up on Juan and says, Monsieur, Signor, your pardon, but are you not the one whose name is like that of the hunting bird? Are you not the Falcone? Yeah. And so apparently, like, they've been waiting for him here in Morocco, and God knows how they recognized him, but somehow somebody did.
Well, I mean, it's possible that he looks like his dad. I mean,
okay, sure. That's true.
Maybe, mm-hmm. But this old man, he used to run with Juan, Juan's father. He has this little, it's like a map. It's not really a map. It's like a coded map.
It's like it's almost like a pictographic sort of like representation of some giant snake, and then with some giant two-headed snake. Yeah, and then some kind of other visual stuff, kind of some iconography, some imagery. Although I will say, Chris, this is one of many moments in the book, maybe not many, but like a handful of moments where I was like, whoa, that is like some really critical visual information here. And I can't believe it's being crammed into a tiny, teeny, tiny panel. It's just like in like a quarter of a panel at the bottom of the page here. Like that's the kind of thing that I feel like should have been given like a half a page or even a full page spread, something to like really see dad's clues in the map here. But it's kind of an interesting choice by Moreno to have that be so small visually. That felt odd to me.
It's super odd to me because I look at it and I don't really know what it is. It just looks a bunch of weird stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it at least should have got its own like close up. Like, it didn't need to be this two shot with the man,
Right.
Because like now that we're talking about it again, it's like, oh yeah, that is a two-headed snake. Oh, and the thing at the bottom, like, sort of is that weird Aztec, like type of like architecture.
Yeah, you're right. I couldn't even recognize that till you just said it. Yeah. It is very like Aztec looking, and it looks like some kind of fortress or something in some sort of Aztec-y shape.
Which is crazy because later on, like this is gonna play into the story.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys are walking around. It's weird. There's a guy in a fez who's like, hey man, I have a wanted poster for the like for Juan and Dancer and Cube.
And by the way, that's another thing that it's really odd that we don't get to see. Like we see the dude with the fez. The dude with the fez is just holding what looks like a blank piece of paper on the other side. What the hell?
But it says he checks the wanted poster one more time.
Yeah, I'm like, what?
To verify that it's old boy.
No, what the fuck, guys? This is a visual medium. Look at all of the embarrassment of detail on these pages. There's so much fucking detail, Chris. And then like we got a fucking Pepsi logo in the background. We got all this visual detail.
Well, it's funny because it's like, again, if this is like a Spielberg movie, what would happen would be like it'd be a long shot of like Juan walking and his boys walking to the marketplace, and the
Yeah.
camera would just pan down to a to a cafe table, and on the
Right.
cafe table there'd be that wanted poster.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Yes.
it'd be a single shot. And be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, no, that would be brilliant. Like, what happened to visual storytelling here? Like, this is a visual medium. Why not do that? Why not give us a shot of the wanted poster, and then you don't need to even tell us it's a wanted poster? So, yeah, this is one of the very curious decisions that are made here. And it's kind of like just the out of order paneling that we were talking about earlier. It feels like this almost might be a product of the fact that Moreno just drew the book and was like, okay, Archie, I'm done. And then like maybe even Moreno had moved on to his next project or something. But it kind of feels like these are very obvious editing notes that would have had to have occurred to Archie Goodwin, one of the most famous and skilled editors / writers in comics history. So I have to believe that there was maybe just not the option to ask Pepe to go back and redo this stuff while still making the deadline. And so maybe Archie was like, you know what? It's beautiful. They're beautiful pages. Good enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also I mean, like if you look at this page, the way it's kind of set up, right? It's hold on. The way it's set up, it's like he's showing us again. He's showing off, not in a bad way, but he's showing off like his ability to draw Casablanca.
Yes,
because these guys are walking through the city, and there's all these word balloons, and it's kind of like, I don't even see our main characters. He's just showing us the city,
Yeah, it's true. And the city looks amazing. And
I know.
And so cool. And the outfits and the costumes on people look fantastic. It is like some Star Wars cantina looking stuff almost. Like you've just got but it's mostly humans, I suppose. But just the outfits and the costumes are just phenomenal. I mean, it's all humans, but everyone's wearing some pretty crazy, wild outfits and a real mishmash of like type of clothing. So
it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, he's having a field day. The art looks glorious. I mean, it's really, really phenomenal, and again calls to mind all the European greats looking at this stuff.
So then these guys they go into like a cantina, I guess, like a bar, right? They go into the bar, and there's some not naked, but topless women who are belly dancing, and these guys and topless waitresses, and these guys sit down, like just to have a drink. I mean, it's weird because it's like they're just hanging out. They're not even like trying to find anything. They're just like kind of just hanging out. And they go in here for even more ability to hang out. And then this next page, I didn't understand this page at all. So, but what happens is, it's your boy, right? So what it is that they're there drinking, and then they see your boy with the silver mask. He shows up with his soldiers, and they're like, oh shit, it's him. And they like kick over a table, and it causes like this big bar brawl. And the guy that silver mask is like, those are the ones we want. Let's get them before he even finishes a sentence. It's like this old kind of massive brawl that looks like from some 1950s like Western, where like
it does look like that
all over the place.
You're right. Yeah.
There's and there's really, but it's really cool if you look at it right. Like the full front of it is like this fight of no one who's involved in the battle. But in the upper left in the background is Mr. Silverface and his men shooting, and the upper right in the background is Juan and Dancer.
Oh, you're right.
It's just weird, kind of like interesting. It's a weird setup because what's important in the frame is like pushed to the background.
Yeah, you're right, man. I didn't even notice that, but now that you point that out, that's a great catch, Chris, because that's like a really brilliantly composed but utterly bizarre panel. It's just so beautifully drawn, like you said. But man, we'll make sure we put this in the artwork in the video for this episode. But yeah, exactly what you're saying, man. It's this crazy bar brawl in the foreground, and then our main characters are just kind of relegated to being sort of half obscured in the background, but clearly they're like shooting after them. You see the sound effects and the bullets whipping by, and then the main characters are running like way off frame to the far right.
Like they're about to jump out a window or something. It's kind of cool because what's interesting about this kind of like page layout is it amplifies the level of chaos that's
Yes.
going on that these guys can't get the shot in because the audience can barely even see where they are,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, you know what, it'd be kind of interesting to do something like this in a movie if you could, like have
Mhm.
the main action happen in the distance in the background. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know. And then
It's a
these
tough thing,
guys,
man. It's a really tough shot to compose, because it's like, how do you draw the eye to those characters? I mean, I'm sure there's things you obviously can do, but yeah, it's a very high difficulty level, and it's clearly an intentional, very,
yeah,
masterful thing to even
oh yeah,
attempt. I mean, it's really it's very advanced cartooning. So yeah, Pepe Moreno just continues to impress with a lot of the choices he's making here. Really phenomenal stuff.
like constantly. And then the rest of the page is these guys are escaping, they're shooting. See, here it is, right? Here's your boy Dancer.
Hmm.
He's kicking open a door, but the cyber arm is now on the right, and in the previous thing when he was in the damn thing, it was on the left. So I'm
Yeah, that
just like,
is so crazy. Wow,
yeah,
what a weird thing. That's hilarious. But Pepe Moreno is on a deadline, and he's got a lot of other stuff on his mind here. So so your cybernetic arm is going to be where it is, Dancer. Because yeah, you're right. It's clearly on his left arm a couple pages back, and then it's on his right arm here when they're escaping the bar. Yeah, it's clear as day. That's crazy.
yeah, it's wild. It's wild. It's wild. And so we're so then these guys try to, now this is a cool scene. The next moment is they're trying to get back to their airship,
Yeah.
and so Silverface, he's got some men who are hanging out at his airship,
Hmm.
like they're at the little the hangar, and then and then they're being chased by, so they're about to be put in this pincer maneuver, which to me is kind of cool, but they're smart because they have like some smoke grenades, and they do, which is sort of interesting, is that they throw the smoke grenades and then they go into the smoke and shoot just a little bit, and then they duck and sort of crawl to their ship because the two factions now are they're in, like, these guys should be in a crossfire and be getting
Yeah.
shot themselves, but because they're on the ground and they're crawling, then the Mr. Silverface, who you see me in the corner here in this one panel, his people are shooting each other, which is kind of cool. It's a smart little
Yeah.
trick these guys do. I mean, it's definitely like, I mean, there's that scene, and you see them in that last panel where they're like on the ground, like
Yeah.
crawling.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I'm pretty sure that Archie Goodwin had written some war comics and some war stories in his career back in the 70s maybe. So he probably had some experience of this kind of thing, like writing, battle scenes in kind of a militaristic way. But as we talked about, Pepe Moreno literally served 2 years in the army also. So I
Yeah,
wonder which one of these guys came up with the idea for this sort of original gas like smoke bomb battle sequence. But whoever's idea it was, you're right, man. It's a very cool, just kind of specific way to portray this action for a moment here, and it doesn't last a long time. It's only a page, but it is a really cool little action scene.
yeah. And then they get into their airship and they take off. And they fly. I guess they fly west again. I guess they're flying across.
Yeah,
Yeah. They're flying across the ocean. So they're flying back across the Atlantic. But they've been hit, somehow in the yeah, felt like we took a hit back there, Johnny. It says, that they're rushing seaward and they're just flying across the Atlantic, and as people know, like, the western edge of Africa, like where, like Morocco and Senegal is, that's pretty close to South America, you
hmm.
know. So in terms of like, like it's, I mean, like, how the Earth kind of could fit together in that little, when it was all like was it the Pangea thing? So then these guys, they fly across the Atlantic, and then they crash, at the coast of South America.
Yeah, they barely make it. I mean,
That
they don't
barely
really make
make
it.
it.
They crash into the water, and then they have to use a little raft that they have that inflated to make it just barely to the shore.
Right. And then they're there, and there's this cool little, that one panel where they're like on the beach, but there's those like skulls that are on the bamboo rods that are sort of like I don't want to say they're not graves, but like they're kind of like signs to warn people to step back.
Yeah, they look like I don't know if they're either like makeshift gravestones with skulls at the top of them. They look like they're bamboo sticks that are made almost into crosses,
Yeah,
but at the head of the cross are these human skulls. So you have to wonder if those are actually the graves of people who've been buried here and had little makeshift burials right on the edge of the shore, or if they are strictly just a warning to travelers, or both. I suppose they could be just both. But
yeah,
whatever it is, it's kind of an ominous sign. And Dancer and the guys notice. And at first they're like, wow, well, this place is beautiful. This ain't such a bad spot to be marooned. And they're looking around what seems to be an island paradise. But then they say, hey, what are those? And they see these little skull bamboo stick warnings. And Dancer says, don't recall noticing them earlier, but I'd guess one thing's for certain. They weren't set there to say, welcome to our peaceful shores.
yeah.
And that's the final panel of this chapter. And it's pretty haunting and pretty creepy. And I got to say, Chris, also, this is one of the panels where I had the thought, and although it's done subtly, like, wouldn't you say, looking at this, that it almost looks like Pepe Moreno is doing some kind of actual photograph in the background in that last panel? Like, it looks like almost like a photograph of like just some stone or some rock behind the skulls there. Like, or do you think that's actually painted texture, or is that just some kind of photo, maybe a photo he painted on? Because it looks awfully photographic the way that rock texture looks.
I mean,
If that's
maybe
painting,
get it.
I don't know. If that's painting, that's super impressive, but it looks almost like a photo collage or something he painted on.
Well,
But I had that thought a few times throughout here where I'm like, wait, is he doing a little photo collage or something? Because that
I think
looks
he's doing a
so,
political. I think
yeah, it looks
the
like
reason
it.
why. I mean, yeah, I mean, without photocopy, but it's like, but he like put a photograph behind there,
Right.
and then he painted over it that green, and then
Yeah.
he painted these
Yeah.
skulls on top
Right.
because
Because look at the background in that last panel compared to all the other backgrounds on that page. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. But also, but he showed us that in, the opening prologue that he was comfortable taking photographic images from like that
true.
was from newsreel footage and
Yes.
painting over it to give it like a stylized vision. So I mean, it's totally, it definitely works.
Yeah. No, it
You know.
works. It works, and that's a tough thing to make work. You know what I mean? Like to actually include a photograph and not have it be super distracting.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's true.
you know what I mean?
As you just saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that takes
Yeah.
a lot of skill to kind of incorporate that and have it work for an effect instead of just seeming gimmicky. But I think you're right. I think it does work. Pepe Moreno, obviously, this is way pre-Photoshop and pre-computers, so he's doing all of this by hand, folks. And he's drawing this whole book by hand, and he is like a human Photoshop, really, with some of the effects he's achieving. It's quite extraordinary.
Well, I mean, but at the time, see, it's interesting because at the time, this is 83, right? Like, this is when I first started looking at photography and like, what's that stuff called? Lithography and that stuff and that zipatone and,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And so I always was sort of interested in, because I'm like seeing this stuff that he did in the beginning there that, like that art, I used to see it every once in a while. But see it as like billboards or like, uh, um, uh, people like they're like flyers and they kind of paste them up, like
Yeah.
I see art like that all the time in the but I see it in the street like downtown or
Right. In the 80s.
yeah, the 80s, yeah, the
Yeah.
advertising stuff.
Totally. You're
So
right.
I
No, for sure.
so it was techniques like that Photoshop was trying to replicate,
Yes.
because they're like, you do this, but if you do it and you mess up, then you fucked up and you got to start over again.
Right.
Photoshop lets you like hit the undo key, and like the early what's that? Photoshop came out in like 88, right? These guys at the University of Michigan created it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I forget. Maybe 87, 86 or 87. But at the time it was just called desktop publishing. It was like this all super new stuff that they were trying to figure out like how to make it work. And this guy obviously made it work because it's fucking looks dope.
Yeah, it really does. Pepe was clearly on the cutting edge of comic book art here, and continued to be for some time. And I'm sure the way this looked must have been really just a revelation to a lot of people back in 1983. And you have to remember too, this is coming out in 83, 84, which means he was doing the work probably in 81, 82. So yeah, this is just barely out of the 70s. Pepe
Yeah, I know.
Moreno, you know what I mean? Pepe Moreno really pushing comic art forward in America, and obviously drawing heavily on European artists for inspiration, and just doing a beautiful job here. So yeah, well, that's the chapter called Rat's Nest that we just discussed, and so then the next chapter would be in Epic Illustrated number 21.
It's issue 21. It's the cover date is December 83.
Mm-hmm.
Here's interesting on this, just on the cover. It says in this issue, Sunstroke by Michael W. Kaluta, which might be interesting for us to take a look at, like sometime in the future.
Oh, totally. Yeah. There's so much great stuff in Epic. Yeah, and I'm super down to look at any Kaluta stuff. He's amazing. I love Kaluta.
And so the next installment is called Jungle Trail, which is the first pages in Epic, the first story. So these guys are stuck on the coast here,
Mm-hmm.
and they give a call to their buddy, not their buddy, but his uncle. He calls up Uncle Raul, and he calls up the Northhold just to tell them where they are. And he's like, I guess he's got to say that they're stranded here, right?
Yeah.
He has to tell them they're stranded because later on they get rescued. But but these guys are like, what do we do? Like, we got our supplies, and they're like, fuck it, let's just go into the interior, because he's using that map, because there's something about because the map. Here's the thing I didn't notice until now, but at the map, the top image of the map is the coastline, right?
Right.
Like, if you see the one where where he's on the phone with his he's talking on the phone, he's holding the map.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. And Jesus, the map is still so tiny,
so damn small. It's
oh my God, you can barely make it out. What are they doing? Pepe, just show us the freaking map. Why can we not see this?
It's crazy because the next panel is just three small guys on the beach. I was like, dude, you could have given us the small guys on the beach in the small panel and give us the map in the big panel. I guess you didn't care.
This is almost perverse, the amount of critical information that's being withheld here. This book needs an editor, and I'm sorry.
For sure.
Archie Goodwin was busy writing it. Maybe Pepe Moreno just didn't take kindly to editing. I don't know, but this is kind of bizarre, the information that's being kept from us.
Yes. So again, the father left a coded map. The first image is like they're there on this beach. And I guess this beachhead is telling him, "Oh, this is where I was supposed to. This is the clue trail that my dad has left me. So hopefully, I'm doing the right thing." And they decide, let's go. Let's go into the jungle.
Right.
He's afraid. Yeah, he's afraid that he's a cool line. He goes, if his father is in the jungle beyond, then he couldn't be part of the militant legion moving out of the Middle East, is trying to conquer and enslave the other Holocaust survivors. So he feels good that maybe his dad is not like a straight up criminal.
Right, because that's been his biggest fear, and the rumor supposedly was that his dad had been, he had broken bad, so to speak, and that his dad had gone and become part of the, the militant forces that are doing terrible things out in the world. So that's Juan's personal motivation to go trekking into this jungle at great personal risk to him and his buddies. He's hoping he could find his dad, and that's the thing kind of personally driving him that we keep being reminded of. And also, just to call it out again, Chris, I mean, this is a goddamn photograph of a palm tree in the bottom panel on the right of the page.
Oh, yeah.
This is just straight up. Pepe was like, I don't feel like drawing this panel. Okay, here, I'm pasting a photograph of a palm tree in a pretty big photo at the bottom right kind of corner of the page there, it's just a straight up photo. This moment, I will say, I don't think works nearly as well. This just kind of looks like a photo on the page. It's not really worked in quite as well as it could
it's
be.
not. I mean, there's no characters on it. It's just like a word balloon. So it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever.
That's really weird. Okay. That's bizarre.
Here's interesting. So I didn't notice this last time I was reading. So these guys, so they're marching through the jungle, and then these, I guess they're like, they're natives on some level. So they're they could be Aztec. They could be like, they're not any of that, right? Because they're in the future, and those civilizations have died out.
Well, it looks almost like if people have seen the Mel Gibson film Apocalypto, it looks almost like the natives that we see in Apocalypto. But you're right, this would be a different time frame because we're in the future. But it's that kind of vibe where they're very brightly colored with sort of ceremonial body paint and like beautiful headdresses and like, I don't know exactly what you would call it, if it's sort of Inca or Aztec or whatnot.
Well, but at the same time, like there's that group of people in like the Brazil area. They're called like the Yanomamos or something like that, right? So there's basically like a couple tribes in like, there's like the Khoisans in Africa and South Africa, and there's this group called like the Bushmen is in North Africa in the desert area, and there's this group called like
it's the Yonomani. I just looked them up. The Yonomani are an indigenous tribe of people who live in the Amazon rainforest on the border of Brazil and Venezuela.
Right. And they still live in the old traditional ways of, and they're still around now, but in the modern era, like these people were discovered in like sometime in like the mid 20th century, and they were like, whoa, here's a tribe of people in Brazil, the natives of Brazil, who had never seen whites because it's so crazy, and they're still living in that very primitive form of being like some hunter gatherers. Like one of the main ways they know how hunter gatherers work, in terms of thinking how we worked 1,000 years ago, is because there's these 3 or 4 tribes still left on the planet that still operate that way now, and that's it's kind of fascinating.
No, it totally is, man. It's really fascinating. I'm glad you mentioned that. It says here that the Yanomami are the largest relatively isolated tribe in South America. They live in the rainforest and mountains, like we said, of northern Brazil and southern Venezuela. And the term Yanomami means forest land. So they are people of the forest land. That's really cool. Well, I don't know what kind of research or sort of speculation Archie Goodwin and Pepe Moreno were working from, but these pages look particularly really exquisitely illustrated. And Pepe Moreno looks to have taken great care in drawing these native people. And the color palette is just astonishing when you see them and they step out of the foliage. It's very, very striking visuals, and the colors and the paint. It's really beautiful looking pages. And Pepe, man, just from chapter to chapter, the color palettes that he's switching up and using are just astonishing. Like every chapter is just like a clinic in comic book coloring, and it's a whole different palette in every environment they go to. So, man, Pepe is really like, I feel bad quibbling about some of the storytelling decisions here and there, but that's what we're here to do. We're here to try to analyze and critique this material as honestly as we can. But I also feel, frankly, a little churlish nitpicking some of this stuff because these pages are just so freaking exquisite. And it's clear. Yeah, I mean, he's killing himself on these pages. So
he's totally killing himself now. But here's the thing, right? So there's that panel, like when these natives are coming out to attack them. There's that panel, the close up of the guy's face when he's kind of shrouded in like the leaves, and it says he might be hiding.
Oh,
and the guy has that face paint on, right?
Yeah.
Now that face paint reminds me of that kid named Tal who was on Sea Haven said they found.
Right.
What I was telling you, that he looked like he might have been South American, whereas everyone else looked white on there. And I was kind of like, is he from here? it's because they say that people would find their way to Sea Haven, and he was a kid, so
interesting.
I don't know. It's just something that like
that's cool. That's really cool speculation, Chris. That could be part of the story outside the story here in a way. And especially if they were planning on making Generation Zero a continuing series, which based on the ending that we're going to get to, I kind of feel like maybe that was in the back of their heads.
Yeah.
Maybe that was one of the story threads or one of the characters they were planning to return to in the future if they did future volumes. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. Yes. So these guys emerge from the woods. They're getting chased like the scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where they're, the top, when the Jovitos are chasing Jones and they're getting these arrows are raining down on them and they're running their asses off and they run into a big ass wall and the and the natives stop and they're just like, okay. And they're like, what do we do? What do we do? The natives just hanging out. They're just like, okay, like we're not going to move any faster. They're calling them like demons and like Domenico, and it's they say it's like a weird, it's like a weird dialect that they can't really quite comprehend. But they're there and they're like, fuck it, like we can't get killed by these guys. And Dancer has that gun. He just pulls the gun out, and he's like, okay, what do we do? And look, and these panels of these close-ups of like the right there, those bottom three, fucking amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally, man. That's the page I was looking at when I was saying how just astonishing the colors are and how exquisitely Moreno has drawn these native people. Yeah, that page is just a showstopper, isn't it? I mean, that page, those bottom panels, like, oh, my goodness.
I mean, the blue in that guy's skin and the way, it's Jesus Christ, man. This guy's out of control.
He really is, man. This is like, Moreno is like throwing the gauntlet down as an artist here, and he is absolutely worthy to be discussed in the same breath as like all these European graphic album masters like your Mobiuses and your Bilals, etc. Moreno, he's right there. He's right there with him.
So, and so like these guys are afraid if they're going to get skewered by the natives. And then Juan, he fires his gun in the air, just like enough of this shit. He just shoots his gun in the air and the natives just take off. And they're like, okay, this is great. This is great. But then they hear this sound. Now, this panel of Dancer, when he says, Juan, and that face, that, there's that clip of his face. This might be my favorite panel in the book. I mean, the whole series.
Really?
Because it's such a realistic depiction of a black man that is not, that feels like a person that he knows. Like, remember I was telling you when we were reading The Question, how Dennis Cowan made remember that black janitor, like, looks someone like, not like, like a lot of times, like the white artists who did Marvel, the black characters all look the same. But this, and there's so much emotion in this guy's face right here.
Yes.
I mean, and also because he's not the main character, he doesn't get the same kind of like love and attention the way that Pepe is giving Juan,
Sure.
And the one guy, Cube, he never gets a photograph. He never gets a shot like this.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that guy Cube, like we don't get to really know his personality or much about him at all in the whole series. And so, he's like the third banana, but like Dancer at least has the cybernetic arm and he has a bit more dialogue. But you're right. That is a particularly terrific panel, that close up on Dancer right there when he's looking up.
Yeah, well, I mean, but he also has we also know his backstory, right? How he lost his arm. He was working in a mine and there's a cave in.
That's right.
And it collapsed and crushed his arm. And we don't get anything about that from Cube.
Is Dancer the one also who likes like flowers and like plants and growing? So he gets that also. He gets that little, personal detail about him is that he loves plants and flowers and stuff. He loves all that stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
So they shot the gun. They hear this because they're at that big wall. And it turns out the big wall is like this two-headed snake, this two-headed huge giant snake. And they're like, what the fuck? And it's weird because it's like they look like cottonmouths or something like that. and they're like, oh shit. I mean, his line is, oh
Just to
shit,
emphasize,
and they're like, what do we
snake,
do? What do we do?
snake is massive. I mean, like when we say the snake, the wall becomes, it is a snake. Like we thought it was this giant, like Great Wall of China type of a wall in the middle of the jungle. It turns out it's this massive, like almost, Godzilla size giant 2-headed snake.
Yeah, and and these are trying to figure out what they do. They're like, are we in trouble? Is the snake's gonna eat us? And that's when Juan is like, okay, wait a minute, I've got a grenade, and he throws the grenade in the mouth of one of the snakes. And the snake is, and the snake is not like two-headed like together, like it's their tails.
Right.
It's like two snakes that are like combined at their tails. So
Yes.
it's not like a hydra or something like that. And and this snake swallows the grenade, and its fucking head blows up, which is also like a pretty cool panel, like that shot of its head blowing up. It's pretty
Well,
cool.
I like the other head. The other head is watching as like his tail head gets blown up, and the other head is like, "Whoa, what the fuck?"
He's like, "What the fuck is this?" Yeah. And at that point, the snake is done, and he's moving away. Now, what's crazy is this is when he's like, "Oh, we're on the right track because my dad's map, the little clue trail, had that snake on it." And he's thinking, and we're thinking when we first saw it, it was this. He's just gonna run across some snakes. There's really this big wall that he had in the jungle,
Right.
And so now they realize they're on the right track. They're kind of pissed because the spears from the natives have destroyed their communication equipment. So they're out here in the fucking jungle with nothing. And Cube is sort of like, yo, let's fucking turn back.
Right.
But they don't, and dude is like, just one more. He's like, one more, we'll keep doing it. I mean, and there's a dream of the girl from Sea Haven, and he's, and this is a good panel too, when he's like when he's dreaming like that. That's a really good close up.
It is. It's a really beautiful panel, and the way that the girl Liana and Sea Haven are drawn with kind of like what looks like almost like a light blue pencil effect in his dream, and you got the close up on Juan just having this sort of sad dream of the woman that he may never see again, and then we come out of there. And then on the next page, there's some more beautiful landscapes as the guys are moving forward, questing on into the jungle and the riverside, and all through here they see devastation, a land wasted, unstable, unsafe to even settle near. From it flow rivers of fire and lava endlessly. So yeah, they're coming across some real kind of just crazy landscapes here. And then again, we got two panels in the middle of the page where Pepe Moreno just said, fuck it, I don't feel like drawing right here. And we just have another straight up photograph thrown onto the middle of the page of a river, of a giant river. And he cuts it into two panels, though. I'll give him that at least.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. That's the Amazon. I've seen this photograph before, or something similar to it. I know it's in that movie Fitzcarraldo, and I've seen other. I mean, this is sort of a famous photograph. I don't know if a famous photograph.
It looks cool. I mean, it looks cool. Like it does, and I will say to his credit that the color tinting, or the paint or whatever he applied to the photo does make it kind of work holistically in the color scheme of the page. Like it doesn't stand out color wise, but it is very clearly a photograph.
Yeah, and and then the last panel, this is another dope panel. These guys are like, they're taking a raft that they made to cross the river, and it's and the thing I like about the storytelling in this is that there's no panels of them like making the raft, like it's just like, hey, we're moving across the landscape, and then we see them on the raft, and that's kind of cool because it's like, I don't think we need to see that, but it's interesting that again that Dancer and Cube are like their patience with this quest that Juan has is beginning to be strained, because he says the same. This is great. He goes, "We're all crazy, Johnny. For you for going on, and for Cube and me for following you."
Yeah, it's true.
And then the thing that Juan says is, he goes, Just one more bend, dancer. 2, just a little further, a little further.
Oh my God.
No, what's great is that the caption at the bottom says 5 treacherous bends later. Okay. You must look at that one. They keep telling them, come on, one more, just need one more, like 5 more times.
Yeah, man, I feel for Dancer and Cube, man, because I don't care how great of a friend I'm traveling with, and they're looking for their long lost dad. Once we confront the 2-headed Godzilla snake, I mean, I'm out. I'm turning around. I am not going forward anymore. This is crazy.
It's fucking crazy. So, but eventually they they find these Aztec ruins, and they find a place that the father showed.
Yes,
that the father put on the map. And when they get there and they walk out to the edge of it and they see like some fertile valley that can be the place where Sea Haven and where the place in the north in Greenland and Iceland can all like coexist. And he's like, this is where we can do it. This is where we can rebuild humanity.
What a panel. What a panel, by the way. It takes up half the page, and it looks like just this stunning landscape, maybe almost from like a manga or something. Like there was this one manga that I remember, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And I remember that one. It's like classic manga, and it had like these just giant, I think, it was an anime as well, but they had these sort of like beautiful landscapes in that story. And it kind of reminds me of something like that. It looks like some soft watercolors and this just kind of verdant valley with just this beautiful kind of green and blue everywhere. And it's a real respite from the treacherous journey with the more kind of harsh colors that Moreno's been using to tell the rest of the story up to this point. This is just like a breath of fresh air, and it really does look like paradise.
Yeah, it looks amazing. So now they're at this statue that looks like something that's like Quetzalcoatl or something like that. I mean, it looks way older than, this looks like Aztec time or Incas, whatever it is. And these guys are obviously, they're in that part of the world, and then they're here and they're like, we can now, make the call to the people people up north.
Northold.
Yeah, he can call his uncle and say, hey, we found it. We found it. And then that's the end of this issue. Not this issue, but this chapter, so, and this chapter felt like it was a little short, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. And I'm just noticing again, man, if we just look back the last few pages, Chris, dancers, when they're in the river with the little boat, the raft they made, dancers' cybernetic arm is the right arm. And then 2 pages later on the final page of this chapter, it's switched again, and the cybernetic arm is his left arm. Like, this is crazy. Just Moreno did not care. He was like, whatever. He's got a cybernetic arm somewhere. I don't feel like checking. Just from page to page, it switches. That's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. It's crazy to me that he doesn't realize, I made it on the right arm, and I'm just gonna
it's just zero concern for continuity. I mean, I don't really care because, again, the art's so beautiful, but it's just a funny thing to keep noticing.
Well, but you know what? It's something I didn't notice until I was reading it, but looking back at it now, I remembered it because at the end, the part when he like lets the rope out of his arm, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, that was so. I don't know, just something that kind of keyed into me. But now, so the next chapter is called Terror in Paradise. This is Epic Illustrated number 21. Now we're 19.
No, I think it's 2022 actually.
22, yes, 22. So now we're in 1984 with this issue. And so now the beginning is what? It's we're back at Northold where Juan Falcone and his uncle are. The uncle is being pressured by the council, and it's like, what's he gonna do? And here's the thing that's weird, right? They're there down in Aztec land, and like the father, you never even see what the father's name is, but Juan's father left him a videotape.
Yeah.
Now this is the thing. I remarked on this one time when we were talking about Grendel, but I remark on it all the time. Before there was CDs out, the CDs would come out like in 86 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
No one even imagined that there'd be digital storage technology. It was always considered to be tape, or to be like analog tape technology. This guy's left a videotape in the fucking Amazon, which means the moisture. It's just like this is one element of the story that sort of made me go, I don't know what's going on here, because this tape would not. It would. I mean, it might exist, but it'd be molded and everything like this. But anyway, that's me just applying too much of my own. Like, I have my own issues. I mean, I love VHS tapes, and I have some that just, but they are not good. They're not good, long lasting. With like storage mediums.
No, I think that's fair. I think we can't apply too much logical scrutiny to that because
no. Wait, I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing. At the time, I wouldn't have thought anything about it.
Right.
But even more recent, I was watching part of Alien the other day, and it's like they have all this analog shit in there, and it's like it's the weirdest thing that no one even thought there would be digital stuff.
These guys are storytellers, but they're not all necessarily futurists. Or it's hard to be an accurate futurist. You don't really know what's around the corner. You don't know what you don't know. But speaking of time frames, I think it's interesting to note that in the title page illustration for this chapter, it's another one of these beautiful title pages by Moreno. It says Moreno 82 on his signature. So he drew this in 82. And like you just said, Chris, it wasn't seeing print till 84. Yeah. So Moreno was working probably a year and a half, 2 years ahead of schedule, which actually makes sense when you look at how work intensive and stunning this artwork looks. It's like we were saying, it's more like a European graphic album vibe. And so obviously he needed a lot of lead time to write to draw this whole epic story.
Well, draw and paint it. Yeah, because it's insane. It's insanely good.
Everything. Yeah, to draw, paint it, and we still haven't figured out necessarily who lettered it, but Moreno's definitely doing the penciling, inking, and coloring. So yeah, it's quite a feat.
So then these guys get picked up on a boat that is going to take them. I guess it's a boat from it's a boat. This is a trade vessel.
Yes,
which is weird. I don't know where it's trading from, but it picks them up. And he's like, I got this videotape and I got to play it somewhere, but I don't know where. And they get dropped off in a boat to go back to Sea Haven.
Yes.
And it's one of those old little like rowboats that they're off of like pirate ships or something like that. And they go to Sea Haven, and Sea Haven has been run over. It's been taken over by, there's dead people here. There's buzzards around. Yeah.
It's horrific.
It's crazy. People have been hung and shit.
Oh, it's really brutal. It's really brutal. But right before we get to it, though, how about that full page spread of when they're in the boat and they just come up on Sea Haven?
Well, that's amazing.
Oh my God, that's one of my favorite pages in this whole story. Like, it looks just absolutely breathtaking, but it also looks haunting and kind of creepy from the color scheme, the way that Moreno did the colors, right? I mean, the colors are just staggering. Like, it really feels like Richard Corbin here, just freaking amazing color. And but it looks creepy at a glance, creepy and beautiful. But then the character Cube, I think, is saying, Sea Haven at last. I'd forgotten how peaceful, how beautiful it is at twilight. And then I think Juan says, yeah, Cube, rowing up to the back door isn't quite the return I pictured, but it's great to be back. But when Cube said how peaceful and beautiful it was, in my mind, I was thinking, and creepy and kind of menacing and ominous. So I feel like just visually, Moreno is foreshadowing what they're about to discover. But I'm sorry, you were just saying about all the carnage that they come upon.
But you don't need to apologize because that's such a great stoppage. I mean, it's cool because they get here at twilight. It's just past magic hour. The color palette here, the way it looks like it's like that purple sunlight, and it's all fucking. It's like it looks haunted as hell. And they start seeing dead bodies, and they start seeing like vultures eating the bodies, and then they come across a bunch of
vultures everywhere.
Yeah, and then they come across like some people who've been hung. They're like on some yardarm, and they're like all been lynched, and it's like, God damn, And then the one thing that the old boy's thinking about is, did old girl get killed? Because he is like, he's mad about. He's about to flip. And then they see there's like a little chamber, and they notice the people, and then they get caught. It's the guy with the silver helmet, the
Or
chrome mask.
it's his troops at
It's
least.
his troops, at least. Like they're here, and they put these guns on them. That's a cool panel where it's like the click, 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 and it's like like the three guns are on them.
Yeah,
that's a great panel. We used to we got to put it in the video. Definitely got to put it in video.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get like put in the like put in the prison. And
Yeah, they get thrown in like the stockade or whatever the prison, the little cell is that they have in Sea Haven. They're locked up and things are looking pretty grim. Even if they try to squeeze out the window bars, all they see is the ocean way down below, and they're seeming like they're fucked. But then that cybernetic arm comes in handy all of a sudden when they want to climb out the window and break through the bars.
Well, yeah, because he sees like there's other windows. There's other. This is where the paneling is weird again. It's I mean, like the flow of the story is right, because it's like he sees other potential cells that he get access from if he can swing out. He can't get to the bottom, but he can check to see if there's other survivors. And so Dancer, his cybernetic arm, has got some cable on it, that he lets out.
This was weird because I didn't notice this earlier in the story, but it seems like the cybernetic arm has a little bit of super strength, right? Because Dancer is able to break the bars on the window, like crick. Yeah. It's got the sound effect. He just straight up like bends the prison bars in the window, and then he offers to Juan, that he's got this cable, wire that he's able to pull out of his cybernetic arm all of a sudden. All of a sudden, his arm is like this magical thing. It's like fucking Felix the cat, with his magical bag of tricks here. He's just sure, I got cable in my arm. Here, take this and climb out the window.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. He'd have like a Swiss Army knife in his... a cybernetic arm. I mean, but I think was irking you is he never used it before.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. If we were writing a screenplay here, we would have to set this shit up in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, even at 20 minutes, I mean, like they could have used it when they were like fighting off someone else. Like we should have seen that he had more abilities with this arm.
Exactly. It can't be in the second to last chapter. That's my only quibble. It seems like it's got a little bit of a whiff of the old Deus Ex Machina. It's a little bit of the cybernetic arm of God intruding upon our story here. But whatever, as always, it's drawn beautifully. So hey, I'm willing to go with it.
Beautifully, I see. And here's this weird panel editing because then it's like they cut to like some facility where the guy in the silver mask is getting a report from one of his generals that, we captured Juan at Sea Haven. He's like, good, let's get there. Let's get there now. And then Juan looks into the prison and Juan looks into the cell that he dropped down to, and he sees Liana and some other people. And she's like, oh my God, Juan. And they and they have their reunion, and he's like, I'm gonna get you out of here. They have their kiss, and he's like, don't worry, I'm gonna get you out of here. We're gonna get out of here. And then they figure that they're like, okay, if we go to the there's like some caves they're gonna go to. Again, it's a volcano. This thing's built on a volcano. There's other ways in to get to the get inside. And so Juan and Dancer and Cube, they escape their prison and they go inside and they see some of those damn troops. And they just, they kill the troops. They just break their necks real fast. I don't think they break their necks, but they knock them out. And take. I mean, I you know what? I'm assuming they do kill them because later on they do shoot up that mess hall. Right. He goes. Juan's the Last Supper, and they just shoot everybody in there. It feels like a scene from the Dirty Dozen or something like that.
It's pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal, but honestly, it's very well motivated after we saw what these troops had done to the people who had lived peacefully on Sea Haven. Like it would have felt completely unrealistic and downright stupid if they didn't execute these troops right here, because they know what these guys are capable of and what they've done already.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
So
and I think it's also well set up in the desert sequence where we saw that our heroes they declined killing the other dudes whose uniforms they stole in the desert that were working also with the shiny mirror mask commander dude, and our guys then were like, no, we're not going to kill them, then we don't need to, we'd be no better than them, we got to remember who the heroes are. But here, they're just like, hey, like right here, Dancer and Juan are talking about it when they come up on the dudes in the mess hall eating, and they say, they're all having breakfast. Juan, it's their last supper. Dancer, if we give them a chance, they might surrender, and then Dancer says, or get away to hang up more of our friends for the vultures. Your decision, Juan. I made mine. But then both of them are just like, all right, fuck it. And they unload with their guns. And it's like, butta, 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 vrap, vrap, vrap. And it says, in the end, it's not that much of a decision. And we see they just kill everybody. And, that's it. I mean, we don't waste a lot of time. It's one giant panel of carnage. And then, boom, in the end, all is relatively well as it can be on Sea Haven. Juan and Liana have kind of a tearful, silent reunion. Everyone else is being freed. And that we see peace has returned to Sea Haven, although now it is forever changed. Okay, so then we leave Sea Haven and we go and we cut over to the mirror-headed dude who's about to get on his plane coming to Sea Haven, and his people come to him and say, Sir, you must cancel your flight. A plane just returned from the island, escaped, really. There's been a counterattack. And then creepy mirror-faced commander dude says, yes, that does mean a change of plan. Instead of becoming a useful base and breeding pool for slave reserves, Sea Haven must be ground into dust. And then here we get the giant reveal at the end of the chapter, our big cliffhanger, where the trooper says back to the guy, as you say, Commander Falcone. And it's like, whoa, dun, dun, dun. Now we are certainly meant to believe that this guy, creepy mirror face dude, is in fact Juan Falcone's long lost father. So Papa Falcone, on some Darth Vader type shit, is the guy behind this
behind the mask,
reflective mask, so it seems. So this is a hell of a cliffhanger. It's a hell of an ending to this, what I believe is the penultimate chapter of Generation Zero. And
there's one more. There's one more. I mean, there's two more.
Two more. Yeah. So okay. So we're getting pretty close to the end here. So, all right. So we're almost at the end. We're in the home stretch at least. And Chris, you want to pick up from where we go next?
Yes. So the next issue is an Epic Illustrated 23, and we this episode is called The Last Battle, and the cover for here is one of these crazy ass. It looks like something out of like Hard Boiled, like this cover, man. It's like, the Jeff Darrow thing. It's so all over the place. So much like just violence and the people fighting, and you see Juan and you see Mr. Silverface, his dad, and there's up there blasting, and so what happens is that the people is that Juan. This is a good transition with the guy, right? So Juan, he now has to decide to be the military leader of Sea Haven, and he gets them all into like, we're gonna make weapons, we're gonna do all this shit before we get invaded. And it's interesting because it's like he started off in the beginning as a deserter, and like right. He's like, I don't want to be part of no army, I don't want to be part of no army, none of that kind of stuff at all. And like it's like that part early on when they go to the desert, and he's like, are you saying they don't kill the guys? So they're like, well, like we're not really soldiers, so we can't really, like he's playing that up a lot, and there's a lot that's made up of him being a deserter, as someone who doesn't conform, doesn't fit in. He's very much on his own about what he likes to do, and doesn't want the mantle of authority. But here, he now has to like take it because he knows that his woman's threatened, and her people are threatened, and this chance for Sea Haven and Northhold to combine and birth the new generation is all threatened. So he's like, okay, we have to go to war. We have to get everything like ready to go, and just and just do it. But before war, he's got to have sex with fucking Liana real quick.
Gotta do it.
Gotta do it.
Oh man, yeah, but it is done tastefully. Again,
it's all to the silhouettes. It's great.
Yeah,
and now finally he gets to play the videotape from his dad, and his dad, he finally gets to do it, and he tells his dad, and his dad has a message for him, and he's like, "Oh son, if you found this, then that means that you figured out my clue. Thank you, blah, blah, blah." And he's like, and the message is a little vague. It's a little incomplete.
Frankly, it's a little disappointing after all the build up. This is a classic trope in storytelling, kind of like, hey, if you're watching this, then I must be dead or some shit like that, right? And that's usually a pretty dramatic thing in a story. I kind of love that just as a storytelling trope. I always kind of am curious, and I'm leaning in. If we're about to get a message from a long lost dead person, I'm here for it. But this one, frankly, was kind of like, wah, wah, wah. Well, it's a little bit of a letdown.
It is because here's the penultimate line, right? Where the ultimate is final line. He goes, "As for me, I've always chased dreams, and even when it hurts those I love, I have a new one now of life beyond the wounded earth in space. I don't ask you that you forgive me, son. Just try to understand." And it's kind of crazy because in the background, there's like some sort of space module in space. So I feel like it's what you were saying earlier. Did they plan to do another series of this?
Yes, I think they had to. I think they absolutely had to, based on this like ridiculous sort of like conclusion of this plot thread. There is no way that they were planning to just leave this here, because it's just a staggeringly disappointing sort of conclusion to this plot thread. So it has to be setting up something that they thought was going to be a future storyline. But also, frankly, it's just like, I think it's not the most it's not the most expertly plotted moment story-wise, because even right here, they could have made this register more strongly, because after Dad says this bullshit about like, hey, I've always chased my dreams, even when it fucks over my family. Sorry, I hope you understand. Like right here in the caption, he says, "Forgive me, son. I don't ask you forgive me. Just try to understand." The caption says, with a nod, Juan Falcone does both. And I was like, wait, he does both? He understands Dad fucking...
And forgives?
Understand and you forgive Dad fucking over your mom, your sister, your brother, you, and you guys are everyone's fucking dead? And Dad abandoned you? I'm like, wait, hold on. Like, this is some bullshit. Juan should have grabbed the fucking videotape, smashed
it. Yeah.
And been like, fuck you, old man, you piece of shit. I'm going to never be like you. Like, that could have been a moment. Like, it could have been a huge moment. And Liana could have been like, whoa, calm down. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, blah, blah, blah. We could have had some real drama here. But instead, it just kind of recedes into like a nothing moment. And that's a bummer, because that just feels like, I feel like, Archie Goodwin needed a note, or he needed someone to kind of like tap him on the shoulder here and be like, hey, why don't we take another pass at this scene? Because this is pretty anticlimactic. And like, why don't we just add a little conflict, maybe some drama going into the final battle, some emotion. This seems like a misstep to me, frankly.
Well, two things. One, I agree with you. Two, my solve was, when I read it, it's different than you're saying about him smashing the tape, which I do like a lot. So to me, I would have had the next scene would have been the last scene of the last issue, where it's like, hey, So when the guy, so we see that the dad's like, hey, I'm going into space, I'm sorry that I did this, blah 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 blah. And then the next panel is, hey, like we realize that Captain Falcone, Commander Falcone is the man of the silver mask.
I
That
see
would
what you're saying. You connect it. Yeah. Right.
If you'd flipped those
Yes,
two scenes, I think
you're right.
it would have been like, okay, so dad actually is a fuck up because he gave me this tape and now he's not living that life anymore. He's still on this planet.
Right. Like what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened,
No, you're right. That would have been a much more compelling, dramatic question. And it would have felt at least like we're building to a head. Now we're going to get some answers from dad who, went left at a certain point. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. That whole thing feels like it needed another pass just in terms of the organization, the architecture of the plot information. It feels like that, unfortunately, is a major kind of part of the story. It's the big emotional through line. And I feel like they kind of fumble that here. So that's unfortunate. That's a shame. But, hey, it is what it is. And, no comic book is perfect.
No. So the rest of this issue is, is the War Machine, is them figuring out what to do, how to to hold these people off. There's some escape plans set up. There's all this kind of stuff. They got some rocket ships. They got some helicopters without blades. They're just able to fly. I mean, which is kind of a cool design, like to a certain degree. And then Juan becomes a damn flight captain. He becomes the leader of one of the little like the fighter pilots, and so he's done the complete about face of what, the one thing he rejected the whole story. He's now embraced it. He's now become the military leader, which almost seems like it was his destiny because his dad wasn't about that, and his brother's dead, and his mom is dead, and his uncle's like, you got to be better, but they have their training, and then here's some brutal stuff. So there's another night he has with the girl Liana. He's getting ready to go out, and then all of a sudden, boom. His bedroom gets exploded
out of nowhere. It's a giant kaboom, and Juan is okay. Like he just gets some cuts and whatever on his face, but Liana gets fucked up by the blast. Like she's like looks like she's like almost dead. And it's like it's a shame that we've constantly got the damsel in distress, or the damsel as bomb victim here in the story. It's a little bit of a trope with the woman constantly either being in jeopardy or being kind of like a sacrificial lamb to motivate the main character. So I think that's a little problematic, kind of by what people would be wanting from this story today. But I think this is just some of the baked in kind of latent sexism of heroic fiction, particularly in that time. Liana doesn't really get to totally be a character with a whole lot of agency herself, and that's a shame. It's worth noting, but that's just kind of also, it is what it is.
Yeah, because I mean, it's interesting because it's like what the solve on this today. I mean, I'm not too upset that she gets blown up, but I feel like. But I think what you're saying is interesting is that she doesn't have any agency, and it's right. It's sort of like she can't escape that prison she's in. Obviously, that's hard to do, but also she can't marshal the people at Sea Haven.
Right. Or like, I mean, what if here, like, let's say this bomb blast in the bedroom. Let's say that Juan was sleeping. And Liana was awake and she heard somebody plant the bomb outside, right? Like you could have flipped it where like Liana suddenly could have been the one who was like, Juan, get up, Juan, get the fuck up. And she could have been the one dragging him out of the bed or throwing herself on top of him to protect him. Like you could have flipped it where she still got fucked up, but it wasn't just because she was like sleeping in and, happened to be in the wrong place. Like you could have had her actually display some heroism also. So it's not just so passive. Like, again, so many of these things, like, we know as like screenwriters, a lot of these things are just like, they're not difficult fixes. is if you just kind of brainstorm and try to figure out another way to approach the scene. But it just requires like getting some notes, having some discussions, and, you know, taking another whack at it maybe. And at the time, I don't know how many people Archie Goodwin had giving him notes on the story, but that's really all it would take.
I mean, he's
would be a little,
no one, I mean,
probably not too many people, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because he's the editor. He was the editor, maybe the editor in chief of Epic. I don't remember. I mean,
it was basically his line. And that is actually a good point, though, because Archie was very high up there at Marvel. One little fact that I think not a lot of people are aware of is that Archie Goodwin was, in fact, the editor in chief of the whole damn Marvel comics immediately prior to Jim Shooter getting there. So I think Archie Goodwin had a brief tenure, maybe like a year and a half, where he was the frickin' big kahuna at Marvel Comics proper. He was the editor in chief. And then Shooter arrived. And obviously, Jim Shooter stepped into that role quite famously or infamously, depending how you look at it. But then Archie was given the Epic line, which ultimately became his baby. But you're right, though. I think it's a great point, Chris. Who the hell is going to give Archie Goodwin notes on something that he's writing for Epic when it's his line? I mean, there's probably not anyone who he really has to answer to.
Right. And I think it goes to the, you said, of the time, and it goes to, it's not just, I mean, it's like, you know, like what modern storytelling has done is it has given the ancillary characters more vibrancy.
Yes.
You know, and I think that it's interesting. I think one of the early movies that did that, now that I'm thinking about this, is I think that like James Cameron's Alien gave. I say this is why, right? Because Ripley's the lead, the story revolves around her. But you think about characters like Hicks, you know, the Michael Biehn character, and Hudson, the Bill Paxton character, they have a lot of agency and screen time and some lines everybody loves, you know, and all the stuff they do doesn't step on Ripley's journey.
Right.
You know, and it helps her journey in a way. You know, it's an interesting move, and, you know, it's an ensemble kind of action film in a way. So it's interesting. I think some of the early films that did that, like, I can't think of too many films.
So you're talking about Aliens.
Yeah, the second one. Yeah,
the second one, right?
Yeah, because in the first one, you know, all those characters have they're kind of equally balanced in that movie.
Yeah.
You know, and because it's that thing where it's like, oh, you know, it's the last woman standing, right? So part of the thrill of the movie is who's going to survive. So you really can't write it in a way where, you know, it's clear off the top that Sigourney Weaver is going to be the lone survivor, you know, because that would take away the suspense.
Right.
So that, because even when you're watching it, you know, like the first guy that dies, what's his name, is John Hurt, and then it's fucking then it's, you know, Harry Dean Stanton, then it's Dallas, you know, then it's the girl, and then it's Parker, and so it's a very like unsuspecting way of trying to like let those characters like fall off. But this story's again like a regular action film of the time, regular action story of the time, because as evidenced by Dancer and Cube don't have that much story. You know, like they're just kind of along with the ride. I mean, like, you know, like there's no women for that. I mean, sure, Dancer is like becomes like a big brother to that kid named Tall,
right?
But Cube is like nothing, man. It's
like, nothing. No, and it's sad because I think you're totally right about how modern storytelling has really chosen to approach things in a different way that is much more multi-dimensional, and I think frankly more satisfying, and honestly just objectively better storytelling. It wouldn't be difficult to give Cube something in the story, and it wouldn't be difficult to give Dancer something more meaningful. Like, these are not things that are impossibilities, right? It just was not expected back then, and so nobody really cared. But I think you're right. When you do that, like, it just adds so much more texture and just so many layers to the story. And I think it just makes things more satisfying, you know, like with all of our favorite movies or TV these days, like, you know, so many of them, most of them obviously have multidimensional characters throughout, where it's satisfying to see some of these these tertiary characters, these ancillary characters still have their moments, and it just feels less like we're all just here for the one great man, and it's typically
Yeah.
a man. It's typically still a man at the center of it. But we're not just here for that one great guy's story. Like let's have a story where everyone kind of gets their moment. I think it's just better storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, there's a little bit of that maybe in Jaws too, and also definitely in the first Star Wars. But it's like, but in this story, for instance, that part, like the part when they're in Casablanca and they got to get out, and they have to get to to their airship, and it's Juan who decides to throw the gas grenades, but he takes the grenades from Cube. So it's sort of like, well, Cube could have been like, guys, I got an idea. And he could have been the one to throw that,
Exactly.
So, I mean, it could have been interesting if Dancer was the one who threw the grenade in the giant snake's mouth. Didn't have to be
exactly.
I think it kind of drags a story like this a lot more because it's that one scene they say when they're on the raft in the Amazon, and it's like Dancer's like, it's crazy here because Europe, you're following this, and we're crazy for following you. And it's like, so much of the story is pushed forward by Juan, and like his uncle's obviously the one who gave them the impetus to do this, go on this mission, and he's trying to find his dad. So there is all that. But if you just but like I was saying in those passages, it's like those two guys who are his friends, there's a moment when they're gonna be like, I'm not hanging out with you anymore.
Right.
And if you gave them, and that's actually a moment of that's what the story doesn't have, and it's all stories don't do this, I guess, at this time. But it's like that's almost internal conflict. It's the internal conflict within the group. The group never really has internal conflict.
No, not at all. It's like a micro conflict as opposed to the macro conflict, right? And like we talked about this with Alien Legion and other war stories too, because obviously the macro conflict is, hey, we're in the middle of a freaking war, but there needs to be a micro conflict within your unit, within your battalion, just because they're human beings in a freaking foxhole together, figuratively or literally. They're gonna have conflict, right? Because it's life and death stakes. I mean, people have fucking conflict over where to go for dinner tonight, like we're not going to have conflict in the middle of a theater of war, like that's ridiculous. There needs to be.
But it's great when you bring up Alien Legion. It's like do you remember there was that guy named Bosper who they didn't like,
I think so.
They were beating his ass, but they were all like saying he was a bitch. But then at one point where he got shot and that one dude risked his life to like get him, it's like, oh, it's like that's what made. And that's only like 3 years later. That's like
right.
That's
actually really
year.
Similar. Yeah,
it's like it's 84.
It's the same year, and it's also from Epic, by the way. And so Archie Goodwin was editing that. So it's like, it's coming out of the same stable at almost the same time.
But it shows you why. I mean, this is a great book, but it doesn't have the resonance of Alien Legion because Alien Legion was so much about the team had a problem. Like there was that esprit de corps because they were all in the Alien Legion, but they just from so many diverse backgrounds that they were like you said, they're human. They're gonna cause friction amongst each other, and to not have that in this it sort of hurts it. But back to it, you were mentioning thing about the bomb now, do you think that the bomb they hit the room with Juan and Liana, was that a grenade? Was that like a time bomb, or was that like a shell that got dropped? Because the next panel, I
really don't know. Yeah, it's kind of unclear, frankly. It's really unclear. That's why I wasn't sure if someone just kind of like, ran up on their room and kind of just like, planted a bomb there manually, or if like someone, from a remote location did. I have no clue. It's really unclear. And I guess it doesn't really matter, but we see in the next page as they have medics taking away like half dead Liana, and Juan looks out across the rubble and he sees in the sky what looks like just countless ships approaching. But they're in the distance, but they're approaching.
There's ships and there's ships and there's aircraft and they're being bombed. like
Right,
they're
at the same
being,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, we see them being
So
bombed, and then there's a zillion ships in the sky, but the panel's a little unclear. The ships are so small, they almost look like they could be birds, but I think
yeah.
we're meant to assume that these are giant ships coming at them. I think frankly the composition could have been done a little more clearly, because I think at a glance it's like you have to use an awful lot of imagination to imagine that those are ships. But I
Well,
think
yeah,
that's the idea, right? Because you see the bombing happening.
yeah, because I think the mistake is that he needed to have like a ship, like a bigger ship. You
Yes.
see that? Like, do you see that little? There's that little the water explosion coming up.
Yeah.
That means a ship is a plane is right overhead. So
Right.
we
You're
could have,
right.
so we could have seen like the tail of one. This is the
Yes.
top of that panel, maybe just to fill, and maybe just bigger ships because they're all like really. I mean, they're way back at the horizon.
Yeah.
So
Frankly, that panel seems like a rare moment where Pepe Moreno was rushing or didn't have the time or the inclination to draw something more. Because frankly, it just looks like he took about 10 seconds to draw like some like really quick squiggles, and for us to believe that this is some massive onslaught of ships in the sky, of aircraft. I don't know, like he's really not selling it. So I think that's a rare misstep for Moreno here. And since we're calling out all of Archie Goodwin's storytelling missteps, I think it's fair to say that Pepe has kind of fumbled this one panel here, because it's, I think, very, very unclear for a pretty massive moment.
yeah, for what it is. Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost like, I mean, see, like the things he needed to have done here, and not that I'm telling what to do, but what ours is, what ours suggested is this needs to be one of your little if this was like a double page spread,
Yeah.
if he did a double page spread, that way he would have like 2 full magazine style
Yeah.
pages
That's
to kind of like to lay this
You're
out,
right. Yes.
to
Fuck
see what
yeah.
all this is.
Oh my
yeah.
God. It's that big of a moment. And so there
Yeah.
are times here in Generation Zero where I really wish that Moreno had taken a full page to do certain moments, like these huge moments that are just getting relegated to these smaller panels. I honestly feel like, Chris, this story could have used an extra 10 pages. And if he had an extra 10 pages, it would have been like, Frank Miller famously in the original Dark Knight, with some of those really iconic full page spreads.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
Batman that really kind of helped to make Dark Knight feel so incredible visually, because you get all the small panel pages building up tension, and then boom, you get the release of these huge operatic pages. I wish that Moreno had a little more space, because he's clearly got the chops, and when he does like really kind of like lean into a huge illustration, it's stunning. But I wish he had about 10 more pages to do that here. I think it really would have helped the pacing of the story.
Well, but see, that's interesting you bring that up, because I'm sure someone's going to correct me, but who are listeners, but that's okay. But, people use them. I mean, they obviously use a lot. It's not like anything new, but I think that Miller used them very specifically in Ronin at first, but then more specifically in Dark Knight. Like you said, because we remember those images from Dark Knight in a way that I don't recall too many other people doing. I mean, they would, like I said, they use them in like, the first page of a comic or the final page, but throughout the issue to kind of punctuate, that became a style we saw a lot more of.
Oh yeah, particularly and especially with the image guys later.
Yeah.
But no, but I know what you mean. There's these splash pages, or more like the full page images that were not necessarily the splash page, but were just mixed in later in a story. That was obviously a signature of Dark Knight Returns. And yeah, I'm trying to remember, and I don't know. I think Kirby did that here and there, but you're right. In terms of most artists in the 80s kind of mainstream, it was not something you saw that frequently. And also, frankly, with the space restrictions of Epic Illustrated and how many pages each chapter had to be, it probably just didn't make sense to anyone, especially not even thinking about a collection, because at the time they were doing this for Epic Illustrated, there probably was no thought that it was even going to be collected, most likely.
Right.
Most of this stuff never was. And, it was not a huge thing at the time to, the graphic novel market had not really exploded yet, because this is 3 years before Watchmen and Dark Knight. So yeah, it probably was like not even something that they were thinking of as an option, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I feel like yeah, I just feel like, there was the one thing about Dark Knight is that what those were 48-page issues or something like
Yeah,
that.
they were 48 page prestige format, all square bound, all that.
And the thing about comics is, it's like there's a lot of story to tell, and it's and page real estate is at a premium.
Oh
So
yeah,
to waste like like storytelling space on a single image,
yeah,
in the middle of a story is like, wait a minute, man. So yeah, I mean, yeah, like it makes sense that he doesn't have that for this, but yeah, but the rest of this, like, but now the ships from Mr. Silverhead, or Chromehead, whatever it is. I mean,
yeah,
it's weird because he kind of looks like Cobra Commander in this one,
yeah, a
in
little bit.
this one photo. I mean, look, there's a cool panel where it's like this super wide angle shot of like all the ships are coming to like trying to laying
Yeah,
siege.
yeah, that looks like a video game. It really looks like you're playing some kind of video game there. Like everyone's attacking the island. You just see a zillion ships.
Just crazy. It's just crazy,
Yeah,
Um, and then Juan is like, I gotta like do something.
right.
I can't let what do you call? He calls him Mr. Flashy Helmet, son of a bitch, who leads them now. You know what? I'm gonna get them,
I'm gonna
and
kill
that's
him. I'm gonna kill him myself. And then we see that old Chromehead. He's talking to his people on his ship, and he says, "Yes, it's over for them, except for the slaughter."
yeah, that's
And
crazy.
that's our conclusion of this chapter, and we're heading into the final chapter now of Generation Zero. We've made it to the end of our story, and we got one last major twist coming up here. So yeah, we're going into the home stretch, and we got a big shocker right ahead here. So Chris, you wanna tell us
Yes.
what happens next?
Yeah, so this is issue 24 of Epic Illustrated. This is the first time that Generation Zero gets a its cover art
Yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate cover, to be honest. Like I thought it was kind of a disappointing cover. And again, getting back to the damsel in distress trope, this is
yeah,
not a cover that would fly today. It's actually like
no,
it's almost an offensively dumb cover, I have to say. Like this is like the cover is so dumb. It's like it's the story itself is so much better than this cover makes it look. Like it's kind of a preposterous looking cover. Is rather disappointing, and it really doesn't live up to the high standard of the art contained within. So I don't really know what Moreno was thinking with this cover illustration, frankly.
no. But you know what? I think this is probably done on a whim because even the chapter heading covers, that he has within the book,
Oh
they're
yeah,
all
they're
much more.
amazing.
They're
Yeah,
all much
right?
more. They're all much more realized and much more thought out and everything like this. So I feel like he designed all of those as each chapter, and then they already told him, "Hey, there's a cover for you to do for the
Wait,
finale."
did Moreno do this necessarily, or did someone else? Because I actually don't see his signature on it, and I'm wondering now if this is someone else. Because like even like looking at Sea Haven, look how sloppily Sea Haven is drawn on this cover. I mean,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
this is Moreno, it looks like he drew that Sea Haven in about like 90 seconds. Like it just doesn't look like the care and the detail of everything else Moreno is doing. I'm almost thinking that this is a different artist that they got to do this. Because just to describe it a little bit, we've got Juan Falcone, our lead character, wearing a leather jacket and holding a pistol. And he's on just like a slab of like wood or something in the middle of the ocean with his love of his life, Liana, wearing a skimpy little bikini where like half of the top is falling off her shoulder. And then her bottom half looks to be naked. And she's just got like a little bit of a towel just barely covering her nether regions. And she's passed out, unconscious, helpless. Like it's really just like a ridiculously stupid looking image. And then and obviously sexist, etc. And then you've got Commander Chromehead just floating awkwardly in the background. Like the composition's terrible. The illustration itself is sloppy. I don't know. I can't believe that this was Pepe Moreno who did this because it just doesn't even feel up to the standard of the rest of the book. And even the water, frankly, looks bad. Even the water looks kind of not really well realized as water. This looks like a very rushed composition, whoever did it. Okay, I'm going to stop dissing the cover. It's just disappointing.
Well, to me, the reason why I don't think it's Moreno at all is because the image is just the characters are all flat.
Yes,
they're flat in a way that like that's that guy's complete profile. Like Juan, I mean the girls, it just doesn't feel like. I mean, and the guy, the Chrome head, like that, like that's not even like the right kind of like that. He's not menacing enough.
No, not at all. No, this looks like it's. I'm convinced. The more we look at this, this was not a Pepe Moreno painting. So I'm sorry. I apologize for impugning Pepe Moreno's work at first when I looked at this because I just assumed it was him. But yeah, the more we look at this, I'm pretty convinced it's absolutely not his work.
Yeah. And so now the last chapter is called Face to Face. It's a cover of Juan hanging from a catwalk that is over a volcano. And someone has fallen into the volcano, and it looks like it's Mr. Shiny Head, just from the image. Now we just were saying that he doesn't have he's got premium, that the space in the comic book is premium, but then the opening page of this is a 2-page spread. It's a 2-page spread.
So there you go. I mean, there you go. I don't know.
It's a 2-page spread of the forces of Sea Haven fighting off Shiny Head's force. And it's like
Shiny Head, yeah.
In the front, it's like the front is like a bunch of ships, like amphibious assault ships. There's these helicopters without the blades in the middle. There's Sea Haven in the back. There's some AC-10 type of fighters that are shooting up. I mean, this is like a major battle. It looks sort of like like someone said something that's from like Out of Saving Private Ryan is what this opening page looks like from, and then I mean, and then it's just battle, and then Juan, he hops in some speedboat, and he's like, I'm gonna take care of Mr. Shiny Head, like personally, and he's like, I'm going out to the command ship. He's got to be there. That butcher's work. He says. So he just zooms out in this boat that goes so fast that the guy, like Shiny Head's people can't really shoot him. It's like first of all, when he's far enough away, he's going too fast and zigzagging too much, and then he gets in like too close, and they can't get their guns to be retrained to be shorter. So and then he's zigzagging between. Now he's in the fleet, and they're afraid to shoot because they'll probably hit each other. So which gives him a chance, to smash his boats, like into the main ship. They almost shoot him, but they hit him with some torpedo, or they try to hit him with some torpedoes. But because he's so close range, he's able to like zoom out in time, and the torpedoes can't, they can't change their trajectory, and they destroy the command ship.
Yes.
And then he's like, fuck it, it's done. I've done my thing. I've done my thing for my dad and for the girl, fucking Liana. And he's like, okay, so he goes, a pursuit craft. He goes in and he goes back to the ground assault, which is again like some scene straight out of Private Ryan. It's like pretty brutal.
Totally.
It looks dope. Like
it really does, and the colors are kind of amazing because like there's such vivid color choices, which is kind of unusual for this crazy epic scene of war. Like you're just not used to seeing kind of warfare or like a war ground being depicted with these kind of vivid orange and blue and purple hues. Like it's very unique coloring for this kind of a scene.
What's cool about it is that he doesn't like do thing where it's like the background is like a wash of color. Like he's very clear, like, hey, if there's a man in the background, he's being painted like a soldier, and the ground around him, it's like there's no cheating.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, you're right.
It's really this one panel where like the soldiers are up, they're all real close to him, like it's at the bottom of, I don't know what page that is, but it's like, dude, it's like so much work. And then there's this page where the fire people are putting out the fires, and it's like, again, like it's all this the level of detail and the level of like craftsmanship and the level of like of how he's painting things individually he's just not cheating on any level.
No, he's really not. It's like really stunning. And I, by the way, while we've been just talking about this right here, I've been trying to look up the cover credit for the cover, and everywhere online is crediting this cover to Pepe Moreno, but I still am finding that hard to believe. Just so for the record, I don't believe the credit. Based on the facility Pepe displays on every page on the inside, I'm not believing he painted that cover, but that's what everyone seems to be saying. And if that is true, that was Pepe's cover, I'm believing that he had to do it in like an hour in the Marvel offices all of a sudden. And it was like suddenly they sprung it on him last minute. So that's all I can think of.
Well, if it feels, the reason why it doesn't feel like him is that the figure design doesn't look like his figure design.
Yeah, it really doesn't though. I just don't believe it.
I don't believe it. And also the painting isn't his style of painting.
No. It looks more like airbrushy. It looks more airbrushy and like something else that is like a little bit more kind of, I don't know, looks more like something of the time in the 80s, but not quite in the vibe that Pepe's got to his work. So
no, not at all.
Less European somehow too. So I don't know. So if anyone has any info on who that mystery cover artist may in fact have been, I'd be curious to hear. So yeah, but back to the story. So that we've gone through this crazy battle sequence.
The battle continues for page after page, and it's like, I'm not saying that like it's boring, because it's like it's so stunning. There's so much going on, but it's like, God damn, dude. Like, yes. The battle was so brutal, and ultimately, Mr. Shiny Head's people, like they basically are on the win, like they're basically about to win this whole thing. It says, except for the mopping up, I tend to participate and cut short any last minute surprises. That's what Shiny Head says. But so he's about to land, and but the people of Sea Haven are all they're doing their escape plan. They got some boats where they're like putting on people and they're like getting ready to flee. And Juan is like, now he's back on the mainland and he's running to the docks. And everyone's like, faster, go. And he's like, well, where's Dancer? Where's, Kubinsky? Where are my people? And he's like, I'm not gonna evacuate yet. I have a plan. And then he runs up some stairs because he's like, I can get to the volcano top. And he's basically saying that if we can't have Sea Haven, then no one can have Sea Haven. And he runs into the room where they are able to harness the power of the capped off volcano, and he's in there and he's getting ready to unleash the volcano tap, which is
and
crazy.
This is what we spoke about, right? And this is what we spoke about at near the beginning of the episode, where we talked about the Chekhov's gun of it all here, like. He got the tour of Sea Haven at the beginning in the early chapters, and we knew as soon as they mentioned that we got an active volcano powering this whole thing, and he got all this detail on the shutoff valve and the power core and all that. We knew that this was going to be, part of the climax of the entire story. And sure enough, here we are. And man, what a stunning page. Talk about using the page real estate and taking advantage of the space. The page where Juan goes into the chamber and is walking across like the metal plank to the core of the reactor. The catwalk. And then you see the bottom horizontal panel where he's almost there, and he says he can feel the volcano pulsing, makes the whole chamber throb. And then he says, he's thinking to himself, this is all in a thought balloon. Damn it, I hate being a hero. And that is so funny. Like, it's so hilariously self-aware and almost like breaking the fourth wall, but it is a really amusing kind of funny thought. And it's a great use of a word balloon, frankly, as well. That's really cool. It's a cool moment. And man, like what a crazy and visually stunning sequence. And it looks like even Moreno was quite proud of this page, because you'll notice that he did something he doesn't normally do here. He signed this page Moreno 82. I have to believe that this was a particularly evocative or rather desirous piece of art. I think a lot of people would have been very excited, or a much desired piece of original art, I should say, because this is an absolutely stunning, just breathtaking page. The colors are insane. Like Moreno is just, he is killing it.
It's insane. I mean, the thing about it is looking at it is that it's kind of crazy, because it's like, I feel like he, the top box is that little photograph of Juan when he first comes in the room.
Yeah.
That I think was painted second. I think he painted the whole thing of the chamber, because see how it's cut off, and like you could, I mean, it's like, it's like that big circle, and it's like he didn't like paint it and then, with the square, like that's like, I think that kind of mess up how he was painting. So I think he painted the whole big square, and then he put the white block down on top of it, and to paint.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, I could see that. See that. Yeah,
it feels like he did that, and then the next page he's twisting the valve, and then someone says no, and he's like, it's not that simple. That simple. And he calls him Juanito. You always were the most impulsive member of the family. And he's like, who? And it's Shiny Head.
Shiny Head, and we see Juan's reflection. I didn't notice this before, but we see Juan's reflection.
This is the dopest part of the whole book.
Right? This is so cool. We see Juan's reflection in the shiny chrome head at the end of the plank. And we continue to see Juan's reflection as Shiny Head raises his gun and starts firing at him. Like, this is some amazing cartooning right here.
Those three panels, when we see, because the thing is that he raises the gun and you see Juan in his. This is so cinematic.
Yeah,
it's fucking insane, because you see like the gun and you see Juan in the reflection, and when he shoots the gun, you see Juan kind of like dodge it, in the second panel, and then the third panel, he's out of bullets, and the Juan's like, and then he starts walking forward like, okay, so now it's on. It's gonna be physical. It's gonna be a physical fight.
Yeah. But while he's shooting at him, though, he's talking some pretty slick shit here.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of crazy what he says. He says, it's not so simple to save the day, Juanito. You were always the most impulsive member of the family. Ask anyone in Northhold. So we're like, oh shit, this is his dad. This is his fucking dad.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Now ask anyone in Northhold. They weren't so stubbornly slow as you at accepting the hints, the rumors. And today will be best of all. We've stopped jamming satellite communication. They're seeing all of this, Juan. We want them to watch Sea Haven crumble and fear. They've already witnessed me executing wounded captives. Like, this is some cold shit, man. I gotta say, this is wild. We've been live streaming this shit. They've already witnessed me executing wounded captives. I did that. And through the communicator unit on my belt, they'll at least have audio of father executing son. And that's kind of cute. They couldn't imagine the technology to have video of this at this moment. So, all right. So he's like, at least they're going to hear the audio of father executing son, which is some crazy shit for him to say. And then it's like, ka-chow, ka-chow. And then he shoots him, and then click, click. He seems to run out of bullets.
He shoots at him once, doesn't hit him, but then he's out of bullets. Now, here's the part where I was like, these motherfuckers are really clever, is that this issue, so these first 5 or 6 pages or whatever we've been reading, it stops. It says, it says continue on page 91.
Yeah, and that's crazy. Like, wait, like they've never done this before. In every other chapter, they interrupt the issue at the climactic moment of the whole freaking story.
I know, which is sort of cool, because it's like, okay, now you gotta flip. Now you gotta flip to the end because it's the final pages of the whole magazine. It's making them say, "Hey, so flip through the rest of the stories. To see what we're doing, see what we're going."
Okay, and to be fair, the rest of the issue actually looks pretty amazing. There's some pretty stunning artwork in this issue, like some really incredible stuff. Maybe we'll take a look at it in another episode. But yeah, Epic Illustrated, a pretty magnificent comics magazine here.
I think it's some Kaluta. I think it's some Kaluta. Is it
some Kaluta, some Charles Vess?
Some
dude I've never heard of who does this absolutely just like staggering story. Somebody named John Zach does something called Jewel in the Clouds that is just like wild looking thing, just magnificently Baroque Gothic artwork that looks like, unreal detail, just incredible, exquisite looking stuff. Don't know who the hell that guy is, but yeah, it would be cool to look at that later. But anyways,
there's a John Bolton story. Yeah, there's a John Bolton story. And then when that ends, we get to the final pages of Generation Zero. And then so Juan's been shot just in like his little like his lapel, like his little shoulder, like that little trapezius muscle's been shot. And the next thing you know is that his dad, the man of the shiny mask, picks up some pipe wrench, and they're like fighting with the pipe wrench and shit. And he's like, he's like, and he's talking, and he's like, I'm gonna whoop your ass. And he says something. He goes, one that I haven't been wasted on anyone else, and not so easily affected by the walkway's variations. And that's when Juan says, "You're not my pop. He can never be a cold-blooded bastard like you." And then the dad swings the pipe wrench at him, and he misses, and then it's kind of stuck in the banister, or whatever, the railing. And then Juan grabs it. He kicks Shiny Face in the stomach. They're fighting, and he goes, "I need to see who this is." He calls him a son of a bitch. Smashes Shiny head in the face, breaks that helmet.
Yes, the iconic creepy helmet is shattered. Broken into a million bits by just a simple wrench. And Juan says, I'm not going to let some madman use my father's name to destroy him. So Juan is not believing that this is his dad. The mask breaks apart, and shockingly, Juan is correct, and we are surprised. It's not his dad.
What is it? It's his brother.
Crazy. That actually was genuinely surprising.
That surprises shit. Because we didn't say this earlier, but when he first went to New York, he was saying that like his brother and his sister had died, and that his mom had died. Well, that his mom was left in New York, and his brother and sister like went to Northhold and died. And it's his brother Jamie. And he's like, "Oh Jesus!" He says we were told that a napalm attack, while you were in the Middle East, we thought, he goes, I was abandoned for dead, and for too agonizingly long, I nearly was. This is one thing that people never do in real life. This is a little dialogue thing. Yeah. Hardly anybody speaks like adverbs in real life, Yeah.
And for too agonizingly long, I nearly was. It's a bit much with the overly formal dialogue here.
Yeah, the adverbs are just never. And he's like, so you're horrors, baby brother, and you know what? And then they just start fighting, and start just whooping his ass, and he's like he goes. And he's about to throw Juan. He's got Juan like hanging over the damn railing. He's about to drop him into the volcano. He's actually pushed him over. He's actually pushed him over the side, and Juan's giving his speech about like, I'm gonna be a mean son of a bitch. And he's like, Jamie, you're forgetting something. And he's like, shut up. He goes, the threat I organized with secret support was to make everyone flock to him at Northhold. So there's some weird plan going on.
Yeah. He had some kind of a plan or some kind of a deal with the uncle that he was going to go be some wild threat on the outside, in the outside world, and try to get everyone flock to Northhold. instead of organizing their own societies, they were trying to concentrate all the people over into Northold. But now this guy says, the brother says, only we've become so strong. Who needs Uncle Raul? Who needs Northold? Whatever. Like, he's throwing the plan overboard because it looks like his power has corrupted Jamie Falcone. And then just at the moment he's about to like step on his little brother's hands and throw him off or, get him to fall from the railing, he's saved by a giant explosion of the pressure blowing through the cap of the volcano. And, just at that climactic moment, baroom! And it's a huge panel of Jamie falling and the plank kind of breaking apart, Jamie falling into the lava of the volcano. And the volcano is now erupting. And Juan Falcone somehow pulls himself up, finds the strength to run, and he does run as Sea Haven crumbles and dies all around him. And then very quickly, we see he makes it to an evacuation fleet. Observers are gasping as in one shattering instant, their home, their enemy, and no doubt many a friend are wiped away. The volcano explodes, raka-woom, raka-woom, and the entire place is just leveled, and we see lava floating out of it. And our hero, Juan Falcone, is in the sea, alive, floating in the water. And he says, poor, miserable, mixed up bastard that he was. Jamie wasn't all wrong. He did say I was usually lucky. And Juan's thinking this to himself as he's alive. And Juan's luck holds as he's like, we see visually, he's flagging down a helicopter in the sky as he's floating in the sea. And then we cut to the uncle back at Northold. And Raul Falcone was watching all this on a monitor. And he's watched the end of Sea Haven. And Raul Falcone, who apparently was in cahoots with the brother, knows that his luck has run out. And we see some kind of officials in the background looking at Raul. He's hanging his head. And I guess the implication is that Raul is no longer going to be the head honcho of Sea Haven. I guess that's kind of what we're meant to take. I think that's what we're supposed to take from that. And then we cut back to Juan, and he's safe on the ship, on the deck of some ship somewhere with Liana. And we see Dancer and Cube, and they made it also. They've survived. Everyone survived. And then at the end, it's really the final page of the whole story. Liana says, I'll miss it, Juan. Despite today, we had so much happiness here, as she's looking at the smoldering ashes of Sea Haven. And Juan says, we'll have it again, Liana. I promise. And watching the past recede, they move toward the future, toward a new land, a land discovered by Juan's father, a land for raising new generations beyond this one, this Generation Zero. The light that was Sea Haven fades, but now there is a new light, the stars. And perhaps among them, Juan can't help but think the man he has yet to find, an explorer named Falcone.
And that's the end.
And that's the end of the story. And that's really what made me think that, oh, yeah, most definitely they were planning on future stories, because that dangling thread of the father is what we end on. After that unbelievably unsatisfying video of the dad, it seems really clear that the next chapter of Generation Zero was going to have something to do with building this new society, and maybe Juan going out into space to go look for his father, or maybe his father returns, or who knows? Hard to say, but clearly they were setting up for a series of stories of Generation Zero, which of course never happened. But I will say I'm very happy that we got this one, because even for all of our quibbles, man, this is a very significant story that it's kind of shocking to me that it's been lost to the sands of comic book history and that almost no one knows about the story. And we didn't know about the story until my buddy Alex. Yeah, Alex, thank you again for recommending this to us, because for all of our quibbles, I think this is an incredible story and an incredibly serious piece of comic booking from this era with some really, really genuinely breathtaking art. And it's, a piece of long form writing from Archie Goodwin, one of the legendary comic book editors and writers of the last 50 years that people really don't talk about enough. So I think I'm really glad we got to cover this book on the show. And I think it's terrific and just, again, visually stunning piece of work. And there's a lot here that's phenomenal, and there's a lot that works really well. So everybody, please check out Generation Zero if you are so moved. And we'd recommend you just track down the original issues of Epic Illustrated, which you can find on eBay or wherever you like. And what is it, Chris? It's issues 17 through 20. Yeah, 17 through 24. So you guys will get the rest of the Epic Illustrated magazine, which has got plenty of dope stuff in it also. But if you want to read these chapters that we've been talking about, Epic Illustrated issues 17 through 24, they're not that expensive online, and they're well worth checking out. Really great stuff. Generation Zero, Goodwin and Moreno, really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great story. It's so well done. I mean, you know what? I think there's so many stories that were published in just whatever it is, like maybe it's one chapter, maybe it's a few chapters that were covered that came out in Epic Illustrated. I mean, I remember when I first saw Epic Illustrated, this was the thing that really kind of like locked me into reading comics because it wasn't superhero stories. And,
right.
And despite me being like a, whatever, like an early teen, not even a teen yet when this came out, and I'm reading it, there was I always had this imagination that there was like tell me stories that weren't just superhero stories, because that was a concept I was interested in as a film person,
right?
And so I would, and I always, obviously, the original Battlestar Galactica had been on, and like Space 1999, and V, I think, came out this same summer of like 1984, the original V miniseries. So there's always some really interesting science fiction stuff that was like that was very formative to me. So when I read stuff like this in Epic Illustrated, I just was like, oh, this is like what I wanted comics to do more of. Obviously, like, the like Dreadstar spun out of this with the Metamorphosis Odyssey. They did do the standalone stuff with like we mentioned earlier with Alien Legion. There was Dreadstar. There was a lot of stuff. We mentioned there was that one thing earlier on at maybe issue 23 about the William Kaluta story, and he did some other stuff for Epic. There's a lot of stuff they did, I guess we might want to do a issue about like episode of like what was the demise of Epic, because
you mean the magazine or the whole imprint?
Well, I think the whole imprint, because like because it's such a failure on Marvel's part, because this is everything that was going on in Vertigo but 10 years before.
It could have been, and it should have been Marvel's Vertigo. And I have to believe that part of the motivation for why Epic was left to die, especially I think after Archie Goodwin left, like we say, this line became his baby. And because I think he was the great defender of it. I don't think there was the financial incentive for Marvel to continue with Epic Illustrated. Once Archie Goodwin was gone, and especially once, also Jim Shooter was gone, I think the new regime probably very much was like, why would we do a creator-owned line? As Marvel got more and more corporate, I think it just didn't make sense in terms of the numbers for the suits. Why would we do a creator-owned line? Why are we going to do that? We want to own all this IP. We're trying to make movies and television. That's the direction we want to go. And I think this is a lot of cost for them to pay for the production of these books if they're not going to own the IP. And it's unfortunate, but I would imagine that was a really big reason why they did not continue, because Epic was creator owned fully. And that's what was unique about it. Vertigo started off to have some level of creator ownership. And I know it did for certain creators, like particularly Grant Morrison, but Vertigo by and large ultimately became not creator owned. And it was some kind of weird sort of hybrid where the creators had a little more control than usual, but DC did maintain kind of like the media rights and the control of the media rights.
Well, I don't know what everybody's deal was and what was the who owned what, and like what you retained. I do know when I was trying to get the rights to Paul Pope's Heavy Liquid, this was like in the late 90s. The deal he had, which was a Vertigo book, is that he retained the copyright of it, but they had a first right of refusal on options.
I think that was basically what they kind of did. Was they were like, we get first right of refusal for like media, movie, and TV adaptations. And I think there were only very specific creators like Grant Morrison in particular, and perhaps Neil Gaiman, where I know that Grant had a carve out where I've actually heard Grant say that he maintained full ownership of all of his Vertigo books, like The Invisibles. And I think he chose to split ownership with some of them at his will. Like he split ownership of Joe the Barbarian with Sean Murphy because he was so happy with the work Sean Murphy had done on that. But I've heard Grant talk specifically about how he had a very unique deal at Vertigo. And so they did do carve outs for certain people. But I think by and large, it was similar to what you're describing for Paul Pope, that DC would get that part of it for themselves. Media and TV, which is all they really care about. They were just like, yeah, sure. If you want to publish a new edition, you can maintain copyright, whatever.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but like they didn't have it was an option because like I told you, like I was able to sneak in and get the rights to do a movie adaptation of Heavy Liquid, and I held that option for about 18 months. It was a 6-month option to keep renewing it, and there was a time when I just didn't have the money to do it, and it was right around the time of like the 2007 writer's strike.
Yeah,
and it didn't make sense for me to renew it at that time because I was like, how long is the strike going to be? And and the minute that I let it go, then the people over at DC like swept it up again, and they still have it. So
and that was it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm guessing that the thing over at I guess at Epic it probably was different. I say that because both Jim Starlin and Carl Potts, who had the Alien Legion and Dreadstar, which was originally published at Epic, they didn't moved it.
Epic was absolutely different because I think Epic arose out of a different moment in time because I think I've heard Shooter talk about part of the genesis of Epic had to do with that there was Eclipse Comics, and Eclipse Comics was doing something unprecedented at the time because they were giving full 100% ownership to creators. And so they were drawing some of these big name creators to go to Eclipse, like your Doug Menches or your Alan Moores and, people that were really big name writers and artists and Paul Galassi, whoever, were going to do these Eclipse books where they maintain full ownership. And I think Shooter realized, hey, if we don't want to lose all of our best artists and, our Jim Starlins and whoever, then we need to have a creator-owned stable where we can kind of pick and choose and let our, keep our primo creators happy. And so I think it was like they were trying to like protect their stable of their top guys from all defecting to Eclipse. Kind of like an earlier version of like what happened with Image later, where like, Image offered such a better deal. So I think Shooter was very conscious of that. And I think by the time Vertigo came around, movies and like Hollywood and like movie and TV stuff was becoming much more of like the preeminent focus, like we've talked about with like the corporatization of like Ron Perelman taking over Marvel and, the Marvel bankruptcy, and then DC like more and more consolidating with Warner Brothers. It just became a different playing field, I think. And it was just a simpler time in the 80s. And like, it's almost charmingly naive and cool how generous Marvel was willing to be with ownership. I mean, I say generous, honestly, it really is how it should be that the creators have ownership, but it seems like incredibly generous by today's standards where you can't even imagine today's Marvel giving full ownership to creators to go and then paying for the production of the book. Like you can't even imagine Marvel Comics doing that today or DC. So it's a shame. I think, the comics medium was far richer back when the companies were willing to act a little bit more like publishing houses, frankly, like willing to act more like traditional legitimate publishing houses where the authors maintain ownership and we pay for production and advertising and distribution and the initial printing, but we don't own everything. And maybe we get the first right of refusal on something. But anyways, we're getting pretty far into the weeds and I don't know how much everyone cares about all that, but I think it's fascinating and it's part of the reason that there was the fertile soil at Epic, so to speak, where a book like Generation Zero could be produced, because obviously Pepe Moreno had to be paid enough to live while he was drawing this stunning piece of work, and someone had to pay him. And thank God Marvel was willing to pay him at the time, because they left us with this extraordinary, just gorgeous looking piece of work. And it's been really, really cool to look at this. And I think you guys will see in the video just how amazing this artwork looks. And Yeah, man, I think that says it all. Chris, do you have anything else you want to say about Generation Zero?
Just that this was a great book to read. I would love to maybe have the well, you know what? I think I have 2/3 of these actual floppies. I probably want to get the other ones to fill in the story, so I don't have full run of this, because it's such a good story, and I love to kind of to go, because I was reading it digitally, to kind of go over it more. But that's what everyone should do. They should go buy the floppies, or I guess, like you said, it's $60 to $100 to get the trades. But look, this book is so well worth it. It's a really, really good story. We kind of skirted over a lot of the really interesting dialogue, and I gave you the highs and the good moments. But yeah, this was great. This was great.
Yeah, really good stuff. Really good stuff. So thank you everybody for listening. If you're still with us on the episode, thank you for sticking with us till the very end. And please remember, if you have not already, to subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments what other comics from the 80s